Hi, Shelby.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Caroline, I'm just waiting till it strikes 6:30 on the. Oh, it just did. Okay, I will call this Tigard City Council's meeting study session to order. We have a couple of topics. The first is a discussion of qualified immunity. This is a topic I had requested be on the agenda because of how many pieces of feedback and suggestions we'd gotten from the public. I felt like we all needed to at least understand this topic, and frankly, based on the information we get, may shape how and what we allow our citizen group to review and discuss around this. So I know we have Shelby. Do you want to introduce your guest visitor?
Yes, thank you, Council. When the mayor asked me to help Council understand this issue, I thought Steve Kramer would be a much better person to do that. Steve is a senior litigation attorney with our insurance carrier, CIS. He has litigated numerous use of force cases, is much more familiar with qualified immunity in the not just the abstract. He's actually dealt with it. So he is here tonight to share his perspective, experiences, and hopefully answer all of council's questions. So I'll also mention that Steve did a similar Q&A with our police department yesterday that was very helpful, making sure that everybody's on the same page. So with that, I will welcome Steve Kramer.
Thank you. Good evening. So it's kind of a focused topic, but you can spend a lot of time on it or very little time. So I'm not exactly sure entirely where you want to go. So I'll just kind of give like a 30-second background on what it is, and maybe a little bit on how it applies here in Oregon versus perhaps other states in terms of how it impacts the liability of police departments. So basically, to give you some historical context, back in the 1870s, there was a law passed that some of you may have heard of. It's called 1983. And the citation to it is 42 USC 1983. And what it does is it gives the public, an aggrieved person, if you will, the right to sue a government actor. Now, I want to emphasize this is not just police officers, school teachers, it can be a whole host of individuals in situations where they have intentionally violated somebody's constitutional rights, as well as federal statutes, but that really doesn't come into play very often. But it's primarily for violating individuals' constitutional rights. And those rights you've all heard of. The primary ones that we deal with are the Fourth Amendment, of course, and that encompasses, in a sense, three primary areas of Fourth Amendment. One would be an unreasonable search, which is when, of course, an officer is searching vehicles, people, property, homes, businesses. The second is what's called an unlawful seizure under the Fourth Amendment. And that really has two prongs to it. It can be an unlawful seizure in the sense of arresting somebody, stopping somebody, take them into custody. It can also be a lawful seizure where force is used, but that force is excessive, which would make it an unreasonable seizure, even though the arrest is reasonable. So that's what this statute, this section 1983, it is a federal statute that allows people to sue for these violations. So why does that matter? It matters because Oregon doesn't have one of those statutes. So you cannot sue a police officer for violating the Oregon Constitution. There is no civil remedy for that. It's only for federal violation. Now, one of the problems that allowing police officers to be sued creates is that historically police officers would not necessarily be indemnified by their department. They might be, they might not be. So you put police officers in a situation where they have great incentive to not do their job, because unlike me as a lawyer who can spend 25 hours researching a topic before I give an opinion, a police officer has to make that decision usually in very rapid, changing, tense, stressful circumstances. That unless you're there, it's difficult to really appreciate the situations that they are in where they have to make a decision. So we can say, well, we'd prefer you don't make a decision at all. So they just walk away and back off, which usually that's not what we really want. Or we can say, if you make the decision, we're going to second guess you with lawyers and allow you to be sued. And that puts many officers in the same situation where, well, I'll just not make the decision and I'll back off. So is what the Supreme Court did in the late 1960s is they created a doctrine called qualified immunity. And for reasons that don't matter and I don't fully understand, until the mid 1960s, there were very few cases where police officers were sued for violating civil rights. A few dozen is all from the 1860s until the 1960s. Then there were a couple cases that came out, and from that, there was kind of this avalanche, a flood, if you will, of cases, which we have had now for whatever the math is, 50 years. So as what the Supreme Court did in 1967 is they enacted this law that this legal defense, if you will, called qualified immunity. It came from the Supreme Court, and what it said was that a police officer cannot be sued for violating somebody's constitutional rights if that what they did, it was not clearly established that what they were doing was unconstitutional. So essentially, we're not going to second guess your actions. And if you had a good faith basis for believing what you did was constitutional. So that's how this came to play. And there could still be, and there still were a lot of cases that went forward because it was clearly established what they did was unconstitutional. But there were also a chunk that didn't go forward. And the problem with that theory was that when an element is you have to have a good faith basis, that's something a jury decides. A judge can't decide, you can't get inside my mind to decide if I had a good faith belief that what I was doing was constitutional. So in the early 1980s, recognizing this problem and with the idea that the purpose of an immunity is to stop a lawsuit from going forward. So you don't incur the expenses, you don't incur the time, you don't incur the stress, you don't incur the disruptions that go along with being a defendant in a lawsuit. So the idea of an immunity is we're not going to get into what you did so much as we're going to say what you did fell above this low bar, so we're not even going to look any further. We're going to stop. We're going to stop the lawsuit, essentially dismiss it. So the problem was this good faith element. So in the early 80s, the Supreme Court, in a case that came out not too long before I started practicing, actually, and it took out the good faith element, and which is subjective. And what it did is it replaced it with an objective standard. So now is what the standard for qualified immunity is, if a reasonable police officer would have believed that his conduct was constitutional, then the officer gets qualified immunity. So that's the state of the law right now. And that in a nutshell, in a 5-minute kind of speech, is how we got here, the history of it, and what it does. It does not mean police officers don't get sued for constitutional violations, because they do constantly. It does not mean they always get out, because oftentimes is what will happen is the law might be clearly established if the facts go the way the police say. I'm sorry, the law would be clearly established that what the officer did was unconstitutional if the facts are as the plaintiff says. On the other hand, if the facts are as the police say, then the law was not clearly established, so they should get qualified immunity. Who decides that? Well, it's a jury. So oftentimes cases will go to trial because there's a disagreement of the facts, and how the facts play out or what a jury believes really happened will determine whether or not a constitutional violation was clearly established. So the criticism of qualified immunity, as you're hearing about, is a perception that, one, it's not in the Constitution. The legislature, when they created this statute back shortly after the Civil War, did not put it in there. It's essentially judicial legislation is a criticism of it. And it's been a long time criticism. And the George Floyd matter, that has brought it to the forefront of people who 3 months ago it would have meant nothing to. But this controversy, the discussions about whether it should exist, why it should exist, what are the rationales for it, that's been going on for quite a few years. And in fact, as I had told Shelby, there's a website you can go to called the Cato Institute, and they have a whole section there devoted to trying to get it abolished. So that's what it is. And I'll use the example of the Floyd matter as an example of qualified immunity. So basically, to get past qualified immunity is what the plaintiff being the party that's alleged to have been injured, the aggrieved party, the suing party, the plaintiff needs to show that there are other cases that have been decided that courts have ruled on, that have said that this officer's conduct is unconstitutional. So in other words, is what needs to be found by the plaintiff is a factually similar case in the past, so that if an officer had had the time to research what he did, he would have been put on notice that what he did was unconstitutional. What he was going to do was unconstitutional. That's pretty much what the standard is right there. I think where as I said before, that doesn't mean that every case everything a police officer does, every bit of conduct where he may have harmed somebody, there needs to be a prior similar case to defeat qualified immunity. And this Floyd matter is a classic example, because you don't need a similar case to say that when you're kneeling on somebody's neck and he's saying, "I can't breathe," multiple times, you don't need some other case to say, "Hey, you better take your knee off this guy so he can take a breath, or you're going to violate his constitutional rights." I mean, that egregious conduct is so obviously wrong that you don't need a case for that purpose. Similarly, if you were to start slapping a witness to try to get him to talk when the witness wouldn't talk, you wouldn't need to go around as a plaintiff and find a case that says it's excess force to slap a witness who doesn't talk, because that's so blatantly obvious. So it's not like in every instance there needs to be a case. Sometimes a constitutional violation can be so obvious that if they actually did what they're alleged, there's going to be that violation and there's not going to be qualified immunity. And the other way you get past it is if there are cases that are factually similar to what the officer did. It doesn't matter if the officer knew it or not, because it's an objective standard. So whether the officer actually read a case, which of course he didn't, but if he had, and he would have seen from reading that case that what he's doing has already been ruled unconstitutional, he's held accountable for a constitutional violation, even though he not only didn't read the case, but it's realistically unrealistic to expect a police officer to read a bunch of cases. So that's kind of in a big nutshell, sort of what qualified immunity is all about.
So Steve, let me ask you a couple questions here. One is about this Yale Law Review or Yale Law. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Can you guys hear that?
I think, Steve, if the mayor's talking, that might help.
Anyway, sorry. So Steve, the question, I guess I'd like to understand. A lot of people are bringing this Yale Law Journal article up, and in particular, you stated that the purpose of this is to try to decrease, or the purpose that the Supreme Court used originally to make this was to sort of decrease the burden on discovery and on just litigation in general for things that were kind of viewed as in the normal course of doing work. I mean, I'm now kind of summarizing, but it was essentially to decrease the burden of discovery. And what is interesting, both from what you said and I think what's in this article, is that it doesn't actually seem to have that effect. So I guess I'm wondering what the value of it is. If that was the original intent, then, and it's not having that effect, then why would we want to advocate for keeping the status quo, other than to just decrease city government liability or any entity liability? I guess I'm thinking more broadly, not just about the city, but just as a whole community and a country. If it was implemented for one purpose or an intention, and it's not having that purpose, and as you pointed out, it was never legislated, it essentially became, doctrine from the Supreme Court without a legislative process. Can you comment on all that?
Well, I can comment on some of it because some of it's just it's almost a philosophical belief on whether you think that there should be more or less litigation against the government and against police. I will say that the thing in my mind about qualified immunity that works is that it's not intended to stop people from suing police officers when their constitutional rights are violated. And that should not be its function. And that's not its function. And to suggest that that's its function, then you sort of have operationalized the definition to get the answer that you want. I don't mean you specifically. Is what it is designed is to deal with those cases where the law is unclear. And it's to say, look, we understand you have the type of job where you don't have the luxury of walking away from a situation because you're not sure if you're violating somebody's constitutional rights. And maybe, I don't mean to sound too, pontificating here, but there are people that would say, yes, you should do that. Most of them wouldn't be the victims, but there are people that would say that, and that is a choice we could make. So this is, it is not something that is used all the time. There are cases where I have very seldom prevailed on summary judgment. I'm prevailed on summary judgment on qualified immunity. There are cases where we almost never file qualified immunity. And those cases are use of force cases. Okay, and those are the ones where most people think, oh, police, that's what most people think of when they think of police lawsuits is, I think that's what most people think, is they think of this use of force. Well, that's an area where, I'm not saying it's never used, but that's probably the area where it's the least effective, because there's going to always be questions of fact about what really happened and whose version a jury is going to believe. And when there's questions of fact, there's never qualified immunity. So it is not designed and to stop litigation against police. All it is designed is to remove to stop those cases where what the officer did, he was not violating it wasn't clearly established that what he was doing was unconstitutional. I'm not sure if that completely answers your question, but it should answer part of it. And the reason it's an immunity that we want to do it sooner is because it is expensive to defend these cases. It's expensive to go through trial. It is, quite frankly, very time-consuming and disruptive to be engaged in things like discovery. And, you know, it's extremely stressful on the officers, of course, to be involved in the litigation, to be named in lawsuits where they're sitting here saying, well, geez, wait a minute. You know, how was I supposed to know this was unconstitutional? And the judge says, well, you weren't really, because there is no case you could have read that would have told you what you did was unconstitutional.
Okay, other counselors have questions?
I will make a couple of other comments, though, if this maybe this will help kind of explain a couple of other things. Oregon is a state that has essentially removed its immunities, so it allows its citizens to sue state employers for torts. So in Oregon, qualified immunity does not mean somebody who has been wronged or perceives they've been wronged by a police officer has no remedy, because most of the constitutional violations have a counterpart in state common law. Excess force is an assault and battery. An unlawful, unconstitutional search of somebody's property is a trespass. Arresting somebody in a situation where the officer gets qualified, well, arresting somebody, period, is also a false imprisonment. And I have had cases within the last couple of years. In fact, we tried a very big shooting case where the federal courts have said the officer gets qualified immunity because he reasonably could have believed in this situation it was constitutionally permissible to shoot somebody. It was constitutionally permissible to arrest somebody. And those are two recent cases I've had where it was an arrest and another one was a different one, was a shooting. And we got the federal claims dismissed. But in both of those, the state law counterpart for the shooting, it was battery and trespass for going on the property. And for the Fourth Amendment seizure on a false arrest, it was false imprisonment. Those still went forward. And in fact, in both those cases, the plaintiff got money. They just got it under the common law claim that has nothing to do with qualified immunity. So I think when people are digesting this whole qualified immunity, it's important to understand that depending on which state you're in, it does not take a remedy away from an individual. Now, there's advantages for people to sue in federal court. Primarily, there's no tort cap, which rarely comes into play in the scheme of things anyway, because most cases aren't worth as much as a tort cap. But the other advantage is you get attorney fees, and federal judges are unbelievably generous about the amount of attorney fees they award. And one of the advantages of qualified immunity is it does provide some disincentive for lawyers to take very weak cases and file the lawsuit, because they know they have to get over qualified immunity. And there are many cases out there where the actual damages are minimal. People who sue for unlawful, unconstitutional search when they're in prison and they were arrested for something that they did where they're claiming, well, yeah, I should have been arrested and yeah, I deserve to be in prison for 6 years, but you shouldn't have searched my backpack and I want a bunch of money for that. And you might say that's fine. I'm just saying there are many cases where the damages are minimal, but the attorney fees can be extremely high. 10 times, 20 times what any money that the person ends up getting. The worst case I had was a $700,000 attorney fee award, and the plaintiff got about $20,000 in damages, plus the jail I was representing agreed to make some changes to the facility. But that's sort of what we face is this. So the qualified immunity provides some causes lawyers to think twice about filing lawsuits that don't have a lot of merit.
All right, other council questions or comments? So we're going to need in the discussion tonight. I'm getting a lot of feedback again. In the discussion tonight, we're going to need to talk about whether our briefing tonight causes us to want to change whether we even have qualified immunity in the topics that our commission may look at, and or whether we want to reframe it. I think these are all interesting questions, and I think it's Steve, it's great to have you briefing us as such an expert in this. It's also interesting to know that in Oregon, given that people still have a state remedy, that may not be true in other states, right? I mean, so it may be a different issue for us, because I think it's important that, you know, people do have some sort of recourse and remedy, and if one is available, then that you know, that makes me view this a little bit differently, perhaps. So, any other questions before we let Steve go? Or Steve, did you want to say more?
I do. There's one more thing I think it's important to understand, and you are right, and that is, you know, I've spoken about this many times in front of lawyers and claims people, not just here but even nationally, and it is a different situation if you are at a state where they have not waived their sovereign immunity, and I'm only speaking to Oregon, so I will say that. The second thing I will say, and again, I have no idea what you're thinking of doing, but it's something that it's important that you may not realize. You may already realize it, and you may not care one way or the other, but this is a federal defense. So Governor Brown and the legislature cannot pass any law that impacts qualified immunity. And likewise, any council, any commissioner, anything like that. This is totally federal. So I just want to reinforce that everybody understands that, because sometimes I think things as a lawyer and I assume other people know these things, and it's always a mistake to do that. But just so you understand, there's nothing the state legislature could do that will impact the availability of qualified immunity from federal Fourth Amendment or constitutional litigation.
Yeah, it seems like one thing that might make sense, maybe long term, would be to have the legislative branch actually act on this and do it in perhaps a more, you know, thoughtful way, and not have it be something that was essentially legislated through the judicial branch. I don't know. I mean, that may give it more teeth and perhaps be more legitimate in some ways. But you know, I'm just, it's interesting. Does the Supreme Court do what you described them doing in this case very often?
Do they do what very often?
Do things like create an entire doctrine about, you know, something that's as dramatic as this?
No, they don't. They don't do it very often at all. And
I didn't think so.
I want to say something else in response to something that you stated, that some of you already know this, but you know, there was already an effort to deal with this qualified immunity within the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks in Washington, and you know, it's the typical logjam where we are. The Democrats had one proposal in the House, the Republic or the Senate had another proposal, and it ended up going nowhere. So I'm just saying that this is something that is being looked at the national level as well as to what to do. So I think there is an awareness that if something's going to be done, it's going to have to come out of the legislature.
I'm going to ask you to give us your opinion now. So I know this is not necessarily your legal. I want you to put your civilian but knowledgeable civilian hat on. where is the qualified immunity doctrine from the federal or from the Supreme Court? Where is it not working well or not working as intended? Probably is there a place if you put your not just a lawyer hat on?
Well, yeah, I think here's what I think. I think the doctrine is very important because, you know, and I'm in the trenches, but it is extremely unfair to tell a police officer with a bachelor's degree in sociology who's 24 years old, who had to make a decision in the spur of the moment, in total good faith, doing what he thought was right, that what he did was unconstitutional, even then there was no way he would have known it was unconstitutional. He could have called a lawyer, he could have frozen everybody and called a lawyer, and the lawyer would have had to say, I don't know, because there's no case that says it one way or the other. And then to say, okay, you're going to trial and you know, you're going to have a judgment against you. And I might add, this isn't just an insurance issue. Colorado just passed a statute that says if a police officer loses an excess force case in civil trial, they lose their job. They get fired if there's a judgment against them. And some people may think that's great, but is what it says to me is if I'm a police officer and I got a 90% chance of winning, but 100% chance of losing my career, I'm going to say, I want the case settled. And if it's a $5,000 case and the insurance company has to pay $500,000, pay the money, because I don't want to lose my career and my house, and my spouse is at home taking care of our 2 kids. But so it's not like this is always just insurance money. That's a law that Colorado just passed on this. I think the problem is that the devil is in the details, and the question is, how close do you need to be in terms of a similar case that would put an officer on notice? And that's a moving target. When you have a more liberal Supreme Court, is what I seem to see is it tends to be the cases can be a little broader. In other words, officers are going to have a higher, it doesn't need to be as close as when conservatives who might support a strong qualified immunity come in, it kind of goes the other way. And I think, to me, that's kind of the playing field there. But it is difficult because you have, 10 different circuits, and each circuit has a court of appeals. And literally, I'm not making this up, you can be a police officer in Chicago and do something that is constitutional, and the courts find it's constitutional. And then you can move to Seattle and have a federal court say it's not constitutional. And until the Supreme Court rules on it, you can have different opinions. And if you see, I mean, to some extent, it's pretty tough to do your job in that situation. So I think that whatever happens, it's probably, if anything happens, I think the most likely would be that it's eventually either going to be overturned because questions are coming up so strongly now about whether we should have it, or it's going to be watered down. And a lot of it depends on what happens, I think, at the end of the year in in Congress, what the elections come out with.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess I'm just saying, the thing to keep in mind is it's real easy for people. I'm a believer that bad facts make bad law, and that's where we are right now with a guy who was murdered. That qualified immunity has nothing to do with what just happened. That's just, as far as I'm concerned, blatant murder. But it has caused this dialogue to occur. And the concern I would have is that there'll be a rush to a decision without some real thoughtful process about how do we expect police officers to have some notice that what they're doing is unconstitutional, or do we not care? Do we just say too bad? And that's a choice that can be made, but I think that's the problem.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve. Unless there's any other council questions that have come up, I will move on to the second item on our study session agenda.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah,
Mr.
Councilor
Mayor?
Newton.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for it was a great presentation. I did have questions along the way, but you answered them. So thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you. It was incredibly helpful and educational, so thank you for being here.
Okay, my pleasure. And if you want me to do anything else, just let me know. I'm happy to do it. Okay, bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you. I'm just realizing, do we have Counselor Anderson on the line? No. Counselor Lube
No.
saying no.
I don't think he is.
I don't see him.
No, Mr. Mayor, I just got an email from him saying that he did not have the invite, so I just sent it to him.
Okay.
But he has the second one,
Well,
so
we'll give him a
hopefully,
moment to.
yeah.
Yeah. And was this recorded such that he could watch it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. We'll just give him a moment to join for the liaison reports. And we do need to be done by about 7:20 or 7:22, so we can transition for the TVC-TV team. Let's see, Mike, will you let me know when you see him on?
Yes, absolutely.
If I miss it? And Shelby, I assume if you had any more you wanted to say about that topic, you would have interjected already on the qualified immunity topic?
Yes, obviously, Steve knows more than enough information to share with council, so I had nothing to share.
Okay.
I still do not see him joining it.
Okay, well, I guess we'll move on. We don't have a ton of time. Counselor Lube, you want to, oh, there he is.
Oh, perfect.
Counselor Lube, do you want to start with any liaison reports you have? Hi, Counselor Anderson, sorry about whatever the mix-up was on the invite. We can't hear you. You might be muted.
It happens. Yeah, sorry, I missed the beginning.
The briefing, if you want to hear the briefing on qualified immunity, you can watch that. It was recorded, and then I'm sure if you have specific questions that weren't answered, Steve Kramer, I'm sure Shelby can get you answers.
Okay.
We were just moving on to council liaison reports. Counselor Lube?
Yeah, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board had a meeting last night, and there was some pretty robust conversation actually from the community as far as concerns about vision and leadership for the Parks and Rec Department. We also had a really good conversation with City Manager Wine and Brian Rager to discuss sort of concerns about the position turnover for the Recreation Department, and they provided some really good insight and conversation, and I just want to thank both City Manager Wine and Brian Rager for being open and honest with the communication and dialogue, but the conversation is ongoing. So, but I just wanted to catch everyone up since I knew it was on our radars.
All right, thank you. Counselor Newton?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you all know, Emilio is no longer the president of the Youth Advisory Council. They elected a new president. Natalia is her name. I don't remember her last name, but I know her well, and she'll be great. And last night, Council President Goodhouse bailed me out because I couldn't figure out how to get on the LOT water board meeting, but I joined by phone, and it was a pretty standard business meeting. He may want to add some things, but we talked about, we got the annual drought report and a number of those things. We set a process in place to talk about the new agreement, the amended agreement coming up, and in particular discussions we'll be having about a new decision-making model. So he may want to add something to that. And that's about all I have to report. None of my other committees met since the last time we talked. So thanks.
Youth Counselor Calderon?
don't sit on any other committees but the Tiger Youth Advisory Council. But yeah, just along with what Councilor Newton said is that I'm no longer the president, Natalia is, and I believe that she will do a great job as president. And yeah, I hope to work closer with her so I can bring the youth city councilor position and TIAC closer together.
Good. All right. Councilor Anderson?
Actually, I don't have anything. Two of mine were canceled last week. So the housing one, WEA housing, and the Chamber Gap is going to meet tomorrow instead. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Council President Goodhouse?
Yes, I have a bunch, but I'll just try to make it quick for time-wise. To follow up from Councilor Newton, there was a discussion that we're having to do a disconnect from the Portland connection, so we're trying to find a new connection to have with Portland Water in case we do need it in the emergency down the road. So there is a process, and maybe if we want to have an update from John Goodrich on that a little bit more, maybe we'll have that for one of the council meetings.
Why is that? Is there a problem with the Portland connection?
We had to. I can't remember. I can't remember the reason why he said we had to disconnect from it, but we're having to. Councilor Newton, do you remember why we had to disconnect from it?
Yeah, essentially, I'll use just a summary term. John Goodrich might flinch, but they've essentially vacated it. They're not going to be using it, so it won't be available. So we just need to find another way to connect. So
they being Portland is vacating?
Yeah, Portland. Yeah, Portland is. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, the issue.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're having to find a different connection point, either through Beaverton or somewhere else. So it was something that was sudden, and so we're working on it and trying to find a workaround and find a different connection point. And it's something that matters to Lake Oswego as well, because if they need water, then it would come through us, go through our lines to them. Let me see. I had my last class today for Tiger Leadership. It was a needs day. I also had a call with the MLC, and there was a lot of seemed like both the calls had topics about how nonprofits and entities are dealing with COVID and trying to raise money, or how people are dealing with it, or just a lot of stress, and also working on needs with effects for people that are either thinking of committing suicide, or really the effects people are having on families, or with kids being home, and trying to find more resources to help people out in those aspects. Relay for Life was over the weekend, and I jumped on that a little bit. It was a virtual this time around, but I think they still did a pretty impressive. I think when I talked to them halfway through on Saturday, they'd raised about 60,000. Last year, I think they ended up hitting over 100,000. So they're still doing pretty good with it being virtual and remote. Last week, before the TCAC meeting, there was a community vision workshop, and we did an in-depth look at options for what downtown Tiger to look like, businesses, what people wanted. There were a lot of community members did surveys, but there was a lot of talk of what people would like at either on Main Street or at the Hall Station stop, or what to do with the City Hall location. A lot of people are talking about living affordable housing. There was a big push, a big topic about having a supermarket or somewhere people can shop, whether it be if the City Hall location redevelops some kind of a supermarket area, or if the TOD at the Hall Station to look at some kind of supermarket that people that living down the area can also shop there as well. And I'll leave it at that. I'll hand it over to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, I was on vacation. I did participate in the mayor's calls with Chair Harrington, even when I was in Montana. And, I think you've all seen that COVID-19 cases are not headed in the right direction. You may have even seen some social media posts from me, and I know the city's been pushing this too. So just to make sure everybody's aware, that's not headed in the right direction, and I'm very concerned about what that's going to mean to our business community and the health of our city, the health of the people of our city, and just economics and everything everybody else is concerned about. I'm frankly becoming more concerned about people's mental health too in the long term, as people are more isolated and having less interaction, and particularly young people, very young people. I see even big differences in my own house between a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old and their ability to connect with their friends. And I know that's happening all over the, all over the region. So or all over the country, frankly. So I think those are things I want to make sure you're all aware of. I think you are, but that's one major topic. I also will share that the mayors all collectively asked to see the drafts of the second revised draft of the Public Safety Transformation Commission, and some of the mayors are talking about whether or not that should be tackled in a perhaps a more organized or more coordinated regional basis. So that, just so you know, that's getting some attention and review by elected officials in other jurisdictions as well. Those are my two main topics, and then I don't have other report outs from the last week or two since I was on vacation. But not from mayoring, I will add. There is no vacation from mayoring. In fact, last week I think I spent more hours mayoring than I have in any week before. It was quite. I stacked the stuff up. Let's put it that way. So, does anyone have any questions about anybody's reports? Otherwise, it's 7:16, and we'll give Mr. Nullup a little extra time. Anybody have any questions or thoughts?
Did you want to talk about the Metro call last week we were on?
The Metro call last week, remind me topic?
On the transportation measure and kind of
their open forum? Yeah, I mean, we can certainly talk about it if you want. And I'm sure the Tigard Chamber Government Affairs Committee is probably going to be talking about this too. The decision, the Metro Council has decided that the way they want to fund the transportation package is through a payroll tax. And that has made a number of business organizations very concerned, and they don't feel it's necessarily very equitable. I think the Tigard Chamber may feel a little differently because of the impacts of the Southwest Corridor and light rail. And as they pointed out, if you're the Hillsborough Chamber of Commerce and you already have your light rail, and we already helped pay for that in other parts of the region, then you maybe care less about this. But maybe you shouldn't, because we supported you. You should support us. I think that may be how that plays out. I don't know. We'll have to see. But there's certainly some broad business concern about the mechanism. Council President Goodhouse, I don't know if you were thinking. I mean, the rest of it was content we already know. The projects, the corridors, the approaches. The new information from my perspective is about the funding mechanism and the fact that it's a payroll tax.
Well, yeah, and I think there was a lot of some citizens that were saying not to do a vehicle registration on that call. So there was a lot of testimony so I don't know if that maybe led to that decision to pull that part away and only go payroll.
It didn't poll well either. Councilor Anderson?
So that Metro business tax would take effect in January 2022, so not right away. So we'll give a break to some of the businesses who've had COVID issues, which is basically all of them, and they're going to vote on it Thursday to see if it goes to the ballot. So Thursday Metro meeting about 1 o'clock, I think, is when it starts. 1 or 2 it starts.
Yeah, I mean, every indication I have is that they're going to be putting it on the ballot. And Councilor Anderson, that's a good call out about the timing, but that was also a change based on feedback they were getting from the business community.
Sure.
Any other questions or thoughts or comments? All right, thank you all. We'll meet you back in 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, I will call this Tigard City Council meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Councillor Newton.
Here.
Councillor Lube.
Here.
Councillor Anderson.
Here?
Mayor Snyder.
Here.
Youth Councillor Calderon.
Here.
Council President Goodhouse.
Here.
Okay, all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. On your own, mute your microphone. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nolop. Council or staff have any non-agenda items?
Mr. Mayor, staff have no non-agenda items tonight.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to public comment. Written public comments were due by 4:30 p.m. and call-in questions will also be taken via telephone for agenda item number 4, the quasi-judicial public hearing, Bull Mountain Summit annexation. You may do so by calling 503-966-4101. Again, 503-966-4101 between 7:30 and 7:45 p.m. The public may call now and get in the queue for comment on any non-agenda item. The call-in number is posted on the screen. City Manager Wine, let's see. Do you have any follow-up to previous citizen or public comment? Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, I'd just like to follow up on an item of prior public comment that's also on tonight's public comment list, and it's from Brian Wolf. So I wanted you to know, Mr. Wolf also provided us public comment with a request back in June for the backup and analysis that our engineering staff, Tegan Enlow, performed to look at the Ascension Drive situation. I just want you to know, I want the council to know, and also my hope is by talking about this on follow-up to public comment that the folks following the Ascension Drive Engage Tigard website will know that our city engineer, Lori Fayette, is putting together a response that provides the backup analysis of what was done for Ascension Drive, and that will be posted on the Engage Tigard website. I think the goal was to have it up tonight. I was just checking, and I don't know if it's quite up yet, but this is in response to Mr. Wolf's request, and I'm hoping it will provide more information about the nature of the analysis that our engineering staff have done for to make decisions. As you know, through the discussion about Ascension Drive, we've created this Engage Tigard website to continue to post the evolving work toward a decision of what to do there. The website will be up through the end of the month, July 31st, with the idea that we'd be taking questions and input from neighbors and folks who are interested through the end of the month, and that the implementation of the decision of what will be done there, which is parking on one side, striping and pursuit of a 20-mile-per-hour speed neighborhood street program, would be implemented only after all of the feedback in the site has been up. So I just want folks who are tracking along with that comment to know that if you stay tuned to the Engage Tigard website, we'll have a response to Mr. Wolf and the backup analysis available there. That's all I have. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Are there any council follow-up questions or comments on that point?
I do. Council President Goodhouse. I have a question. As City Manager Wine, as you stated that there was a letter that already went out. I was curious why the letter went out as far as at least a proposed decision before the website was live, and also before discussing it with council. I know that one of the council meetings, the council has said that we'd like to have any proposed recommendations brought to council or discussed with council first before going out. So I'm kind of curious of why we didn't have a council discussion on that first, and why at least a proposed decision was made before the website was live, to at least take more feedback and then do it. As we were telling people that were commenting that they could comment on that first, then we would make a decision. But it seems, at least perception of people, that we made a decision before that site was live, even though we still were taking comments on that proposed decision.
I'm not sure that was quite the order of what happened, but I would say that our city engineer, Lori Fea, provided a memo to the council about the proposed decision, and I reported on it at administrative report. And as I said, the implementation of this decision is not going to happen until we've had the Engage site up for a month and received comments and questions about the proposal. So
did that proposal go out to those citizens, or to those residents? Because I've had residents say that they know about that proposal. So did that get mailed out to them or sent out to them?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why I guess I was asking, is I thought before that was even done that we would at least discussed it first, or it would have came to council before it went to them. So that was just my understanding.
Well, it sounds like
memo
it
was
did come.
provided.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, City Manager Wine, it sounds like it did come to council in the form of a memo, correct? A briefing memo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Next item under public comment, Chief McAlpine, your update, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Okay, thank you, Mr. Noah. Again, this is the June dashboard that I've provided you. One of the things that I would like to highlight is that we noted that in our assaults, they increased by 64% for the month of June. And a deeper dive into that particular crime, we noted that there were 5 aggravated assaults, one of which was two young males assaulted our officers. We also had a homeless male pointing a gun and threatening others near the bottle drop. The rest of them fell mostly in the simple assaults, and again, those were more in our behavioral health. Give you a little bit of an example. We did have a behavioral health male attack a store employee unprovoked, kicking and punching. We had another behavioral health delusional suicidal, ran to a neighbor, yanked her hair, pulling her to the ground and scratching her arms. Another delusional paranoid off meds, scratched a girlfriend. And then we had another behavioral health where an individual was walking down the street naked and punched one of our officers in the head. So again, we're just seeing most of our assaults are in the realm of mental health that we're responding to. The other thing I'd like to point out is down below on page 1, you can see under calls for service, we now have the third line that says online crime reports. So for the month of June, that went live, and so far we've had 35 online reports. Our goal, based on our data, suggests that if we can get 8 to 10% of our calls where people choose to do it or that qualify for online reporting, that will also free up our officers' time. And so we are starting to see our community use that tool. The other thing I would like to say on the report is also on page 1 under the photo enforcement. We have a line item that's ready to go out next month when we'll report out speed enforcement data. So we still get our red light data, and then we'll have a separate line item for our speed enforcement and be able to provide you those numbers. We can't on a monthly basis give the percentage of, how many are Tigard residents versus those who are just commuting through Tigard. That requires a separate hand search, and I'll do that more on a quarterly or 6-month basis, or when I have perhaps a staff that might be in a light duty status, but it's not something that's in the automatic reporting tool. Other things I'd like to draw attention is that we also now post this dashboard that will go on our website, the police website, and also on the community page with a link to our website. So once I've presented this dashboard, we will make it public for those who wish to see more of the data that I present. We also now have a call log on our website. So again, there was a period of maybe 2 months while we were had a gap between our public information officers. And one of the things that I've learned since I've been here in 3 years that doing the police log for the media was very time consuming, and it often required a lot of overtime to accomplish this. So we put it on pause till we could look at a model to be more efficient and not cost employee overtime. And so now we're able to take a portion of our weekly calls, put them on our website, and then any media entity can take it off our website and go ahead and publish it in their paper or their media outlet. And so far, I think that is satisfying our media partners. And I think that is it. Also, if I can go to the next slide. As I try to do in June, even though I'm reporting out the fireworks, we know it's always important to our community to see how the fireworks went. So I just want to show you that we were pretty similar to last year. In some ways, I think it's good considering we did not have a big event this year, and I was concerned that a lot of the community would put it upon themselves to go ahead and light fireworks. We did dedicate two officer cars to try and handle enforcement end of it, and we were able to respond to a majority of the calls that resulted in more education and cease of the celebrations. You can see our peak times this year were a little bit earlier at 9 and 10 o'clock in the evening. But next month I'll have a little bit deeper dive on perhaps maybe anecdotal stuff on the contacts we had from our community members to our fireworks enforcement team. But again, we did have dedicated officers since we were not having officers work an event, and hope with our hope of lowering the number of fireworks complaints. And I'm not sure that we met our goal, but I don't know what it would have looked like perhaps if we didn't have those enforcement teams out there. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Chief McAlpine, I'll just, on the fireworks topic, I'll just share that the 2019 data, we also did not have a public show because of the issues at the high school. And so your data is actually very telling to me, at least, about 2017 and 2018 versus when we have a public show. There's clearly more complaints and actually pretty consistent number. So that's interesting just for your data interpretation.
No, I appreciate that, because you're right. I did not recall, but you're absolutely correct on that. And then also just the reason why it was, I think most of it was around midnight last year, and this year it was much earlier for whatever reasons. Maybe it was more family oriented, I don't know. Again, we also tried to do a preemptive strike in that this was the second year in a row where we've taken either complaints ahead of time where neighbors were anticipating that their other neighbors were going to be lighting fireworks, and we tried to make some contact earlier in the day, trying to let them know that we're out here and to adhere. And again, I don't really have, other than the numbers, to say if we were very successful in making those contacts as well. So again, I will be doing a little bit deeper dive, but I at least wanted to get the numbers out to you earlier in case the community was contacting the council.
Thank you. Other councilors have questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, it's Councilor Newton. Chief, I think it's great that we're doing the online reports. For those at home that might be watching, could you just summarize really quickly the kinds of things people might use that for the online reporting tool? Thank you.
Sure, be happy to. Again, it is what we consider maybe our cold calls, or where there are no suspect information. if you happen to have your car broken into and you had some items that were stolen, maybe some damage to your car, rather than wait because your intent is more for insurance purposes and you choose not to wait or you can't wait, you do that, have that option of going on your computer or your smartphone and making that report. It can be graffiti too, and so there's a list on what is qualified on our website. But again, it's more of the, we have no suspect information. Obviously, nothing is in progress. We would definitely want you to call 911 on those incidents.
Thank you.
Chief, I had a question. The fireworks numbers that you put out there, are they specific to July 4th only?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Just because I was curious, because I, from what I've heard publicly and what I heard in my own neighborhood, fireworks were going off for an entire week. And so I would just be curious, you know, what the complaints would be maybe for the entire week, because for me, that would be more of a cumulative representation of the situation that we had.
Yes, and this is about my 4th year reporting out, and I have only focused on the 4th of July. Mostly because I try and show the type of calls we're usually on, which are domestics, DUIs, things of that nature. It really is to try and inform the community, because we definitely every year don't meet their expectations, and particularly in 4th of July when maybe even the law-abiding citizens end up trying to celebrate in this fashion. So my focus has always been 4th of July, but I would be happy to expand it if the council would like me to next year as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious in general, maybe not specific data, but if you felt like there was a lot of calls in the week leading up to it, or if fireworks were just a particular issue in this time.
Not a high number from a police-related perspective, but I imagine if it's in your community, some other people might have, would disagree that it seems like they were having more frequency.
Thank you.
All right, any other members of council? All right, we will move on to Tigard Area Chamber of Commerce update. Jessica Love, are you present?
I am. Hi, council.
Good evening.
So for our Leadership Tigard program, we had our last class today of class of 2020, and we will be graduating 16 students this year on July 29th, and the graduation ceremony will be on the Leadership Tigard Facebook page, streaming live, and also on the Tigard Chamber of Commerce YouTube channel. So we encourage everyone to join us at 5:15 p.m. that evening. The class project this year was putting in a playground for Family Promise of Tualatin Valley, and so they'll be reviewing that during the graduation ceremony as well. And then the Washington County Business Recovery Center is now open in the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce, and this was funded through the CARES Act and is there to provide businesses within our community complimentary individualized business consulting to help during this time of recovery. So we're encouraging everyone to check that out, all of our business owners in the community to check that out. Chambers all over Oregon are lobbying for a temporary and targeted liability relief targeted directly towards COVID-19. And then we hosted our annual meeting at the end of June, and we had Tim McBratney with Pacific Residential Mortgage roll off our board, and he was on there for 10 years. So we're super grateful for his time commitment. And our new board members are Paul Ridlin with Burgerville, Maria Halstead with Washington Square, and then also Dr. Sue Ricky-Smith with the Tigard Tualatin School District. And then the Tigard Shining Stars Community Awards Gala is going to be moved virtually in early fall. More information will be released soon on that. And then we will be doing a special award ceremony for the scholarship recipients, which all of our scholarship recipients have been notified, but we'll be announcing soon who the actual winners are. And then we encourage everyone to check out our calendar. We have a lot of great business connection events happening still. All of them are still held virtually. And then for your Tigard Farmers Market update, we have hit capacity, which is amazing. And so now we're looking at opportunities on how to grow the footprint of the market. And so that's super exciting. And then starting this Sunday, we will be requiring all patrons, including children, to wear a mask while they are shopping within the market. And then for downtown Tigard, we are launching the art scavenger hunt, which will be coming out in the end of July. And this is where we are encouraging Tigard community members to come and check out all the new art that's been added to downtown Tigard. Any questions?
Wow, you covered a lot of ground there. Thank you.
I did. Yes. No problem.
Council, any questions for Ms. Love?
Yeah, I have one really quick. Thanks, Jessica, for the thorough report. The business center that you were talking about, I'm assuming that folks access those services virtually, or how does that work?
I believe there is virtual consultation, and then I know that we have a representative that is walking around to businesses safely. She has a mask on and everything like that, just introducing the program.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Always good to see and hear from you.
Thank you so much.
We'll move on to public comment. This is for items that are not on the agenda where there will be a formal public comment. We did receive, and I think Deputy Recorder Patton, we did receive two pieces of written public comment, correct? One from
Yes.
Mr. Wolf about Ascension Drive parking, and then one from Russell Glynn about city action on racial injustice. Were there any others?
No, that was all the written comment for tonight, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Council, have you all had an opportunity to review both of those? During our discussion on our racial justice, I may ask you all to help me interpret the second letter, because I read it 2 or 3 times and I'm still not sure I fully grasped what was really being suggested. So, and I read them multiple times when I don't understand them to try to understand. So I may ask for your help in interpreting that one.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd actually just like to reach out to Mr. Glenn kind of regarding the last sentence, which really struck me in his message. He said most of us want a city government focused on improving our quality of life, not racism and equity. And it really struck me because for a lot of our community members, their quality of life is dependent on equity and having a community that's not racist. And so I just wanted to bring that to the forefront and make sure to address it head on.
Well, thank you. That line struck me too, and that line I did understand very clearly. Some of the other parts I had more trouble understanding what the intent was, but I did get that one. So I appreciate you pointing that out, and we will certainly discuss it, that comment further. And then I think Mr. Wolf's public comments already been addressed through follow-up from the city manager earlier in the meeting. Does anyone have any other things they want to say or comment about that? And Mr. Nollup, do we have any callers?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have 3 callers at this time. I will put the first one through now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, caller. Please state your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, this is Brian Wolf. I'm at 13075 Southwest Ascension Drive in Tigard, Oregon. Mayor, I appreciate the time here to actually augment the comments that were made earlier with regard to Ascension Drive, because I think it's important that we augment the record and maybe correct the record a little bit in terms of some of the statements that were made. First is there was an implication that the city has not made a decision yet. Yet, in fact, on 3 separate occasions through this whole process, in April, May, and in June, the city has tried to put a decision before reaching out to citizens, affected citizens, and getting comment. We're left with no other assumption or belief that the city has already made decisions, and that any attempt to reach out to citizens for comment is just purely perfunctory. This started in April when we received the initial letter from the city saying they were going to implement this no parking zone, even though they had no engagement with the city, with the citizens whatsoever. After pushback and intervention by the city council, thank you, we got that delayed. But before comments were made by impacted citizens, yet again, the city sent out a letter and a crew to implement the no parking zone even before engaging us in May. And then the city manager actually retracted that and said, oh no, we meant to actually send a letter first, and then we were going to send out the crew. Meaning that the decision had already been made. Once again, thanks to the intervention of City Council, we got that delayed in the June 9th meeting, yet none of the commitments in the June 9th meeting have been made. And yet again, we received feedback from the city on June 30th that they were going ahead and implementing a no parking zone on Ascension before engaging with us, before taking feedback. So we're left once again with no other belief that the city already has made this decision, and they're just waiting to implement it, regardless of what we say. And once again, that's a great disregard for me as a citizen. This community, which I've lived in for 22 years, and I would expect more from our elected officials as well as our hired officials within the city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. On your last comment there, I think the city council's tried pretty hard, and you even acknowledged it a couple different times, to try to make sure that this issue is proceeding with citizen input appropriately. But I understand the frustration, and if you feel like we should have or could have done more, I certainly would appreciate just some direct feedback about what perhaps you think the council or myself could have done more of with this incident and situation. So that I think that's one comment I'd make. The other comment, just to clarify, I think Mr. Wolf's comments make they reflect for the most part what the council collectively understands. I do know that there was a series of meetings held with citizens to gain input before the June 30th communication, so that's probably the only clarification I would add that I think would be important for everybody to know. Do any other members of the council wish to say anything further on this evening? Okay.
I was just going to reiterate what I just said. I don't think it went the process that we kind of thought was going to go. So I was exactly what I said before, is I thought that there'd be more of a process followed where the site would be up first before any kind of proposal went out, so there wasn't the perception of a decision being made already, or even though council was sent a memo, we'd have a chance to really discuss it as a council before it really going out to those residents as well. So it seemed to me is that one thing was being said, but then kind of different actions were taken, and then that's what I think causes grief or mistrust in the with the citizens. If it looks like it's going to be one direction, but then a letter goes out, then I think we get in these situations. So be something that we maybe work on in the future to make sure that we do that in a more of a transparent order.
Well, and I will further follow up on what you just said, because it is more, from my perspective as mayor, it is more than just the appearance of people providing their input and being able to help shape their community. It's not about the appearance necessarily. I mean, appearances matter, but it's about actually doing that and meaning it, which I strongly believe in. So I just, and Council President Goodhouse, I'm not saying you don't. I just want to state that it's more than just the appearance of it. I mean, appearances can be a challenge, but it's actually doing it.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor
It's
Newton.
Councilor Newton, and I may be assuming something here, but I know that the staff has a proposal out there for folks to comment on, and hearing that we're using the Engaged Tigard website, if I'm not using the right name, I apologize, to get more feedback, I was making the assumption that the proposal may be tweaked or changed like it was. We went from no parking on both sides to one side based on the feedback that we get on the website or from people that comment. Maybe I'm incorrect, but that was the assumption that I was making, that that it may be that when we get to the end of July, after we've gotten more comments, it's possible we may be, you know, they may be able to impact that somewhat, but maybe I'm making an incorrect assumption, but that's what I assumed based on what the city manager told us about the website. So.
This is Councilor Lube. I would also just echo what Councilor Newton said. That was also my assumption. And if that is in fact the case, I actually appreciated that the residents had an opportunity to discuss an updated proposal rather than continue to talk about the original proposal, which isn't the updated proposal that the city is looking for. So I certainly hope that the community is engaged, and I want the residents to feel heard and a part of the process. But I was also making the same assumptions that Councilor Newton was.
City Manager Wine, did you want to say something? I saw you pop up on your screen.
No, I don't think for tonight I have anything to add. If it would be, helpful, the progression of the information that we posted and also what was sent to the residents and the neighbors who have been engaged on this, I can produce for the council again. I understand and I'm sympathetic about the comment that was made by Mr. Wolf that that it may seem that staff have decided something and then are just going to go ahead. But I can assure you that our staff have made a diligent effort to provide information about the way they analyze the situation on Ascension Drive, listen to the concerns of the residents, and reached out and asked them for their input and more information that might influence a future decision. And as has been said, the purpose of putting the revised proposal out on the Engage Tigard website is to solicit further comment and to get feedback. And I think that our goal also in engaging the neighbors on Ascension Drive to get their input and their perspectives was to learn from them about what their experiences are living there and what they've been experiencing, and take that into account. That said, well, I'll leave it there. I'm happy to. I don't have a timeline at hand here, but I think we put the Engage Tigard website up on July 1st. Our plan was to have it out there for a month. If we receive input that would somehow further revise the proposal, that is certainly a possibility. Although I would hope that we have an engineering team and staff who have expertise in how to figure out how to solve these problems, which are not just about parking, but also about safety and also about speed, and try to come up with an option that probably won't make everybody happy, but that serves to maybe help people understand what the circumstances are, and that's the purpose of posting that analysis. Anyway, I recognize all the perspectives that are being shared here. I will also say, I apologize if the council thought that this was a decision that you would be making, but it's actually the purview of the city engineer. And so to bring a decision like this, of which there are hundreds throughout the city, to the council for you to deliberate would probably overwhelm your agenda. In any event, we can talk more about this situation and what you would like to see done differently, and also what the neighbors would like to see done differently. And I appreciate all the feedback that we've gotten, and we've tried to listen and be responsive. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nolup, caller number 2, please. And they don't need to state their address, by the way. We've done away with that requirement.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you, caller. Please state your name and keep your testimony to 3 minutes if we can.
Hello, this is Kate Rogers, and I am the chair of the TCAC and also sat on the advisory committee for the senior housing project alongside the senior center. And I just wanted to say that affordable senior housing is a critical need in our community, and I absolutely support the development of this property into an affordable senior housing center. I was very happy with the selection of Northwest Housing Authority, given their experience in developing and managing affordable senior housing, including offering services after the facility was built and managing the facility. And I was also very happy with their openness to working with the senior center to partner with providing services to our senior community. As part of the advisory committee, we were able to give feedback, and that included feedback from the senior center management and patrons as well as neighbors. Tom Anderson was on that committee, myself, Fayez, a TCAC member, and they really looked at the feedback, especially around parking and providing emergency services access, and revised the design several times to make sure that they could accommodate those two very critical needs. There was also a live panel event on June 25th for the community to provide additional information as well as to solicit feedback. So I would definitely be in support of moving forward with this very critical affordable senior housing project. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Mr. Nullup, caller number 3.
Thank you, caller. Please state your name for the record and keep your comment to 3 minutes if possible.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Fayez Saud. I'm a member of the TCAC Commission, and actually I was on the committee for the senior housing project, and I'm calling to voice my support for the project. I think the city of Tigard in need of affordable housing, and specifically for vulnerable population or the elderly. And this is an ideal location next to services that could be provided through the senior center, close to the library, and also close to a park. It is within a neighborhood that it's really provide the home for the elderly, that they feel that they are part of the community, not segregated. Also, that's one other thing, it's really help and emphasize that affordable housing should be distributed around the city, not just in one area. And even though this one happened to be a TIF area, which is really very helpful because it secures a lot of additional funding for the project through the state and working with nonprofit community members that really make this project very successful. Also, actually, I would like to thank the staff, even though we don't have a housing department or housing bureau for the city of Tigard. I think they did a great job because this kind of projects involve a lot of work and a lot of, reach out to community members and other, let's say, entities to secure funds. And I'm just voicing my support for the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Mr. Nullup, have we received any additional callers since we got the report of 3?
Mr. Mayor, we have not. The queue is empty.
Okay. We will move on to item number 4 on our agenda, quasi-judicial public hearing on Bull Mountain Summit annexation. I'm going to open the public hearing with my knuckles. And hearing procedures, City Attorney Rahala.
Yes, this is a quasi-judicial annexation proceeding. Council's decision must be based on the following substantive criteria: Community Development Code, chapters 18.710 and 18.720, Comprehensive Plan Goals 1, 11, 12, and 14, Metro Council Code Chapter 3.09, and Oregon Revised Statute Chapter 222. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the relevant approval criteria described in the staff report or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation that apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue clearly enough so that council understands and can address the issue precludes an appeal to LUBA on that issue. Failure of the applicant to object to a condition of approval may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Members of the City Council will be asked whether they have any conflicts of interest. If a council member has an actual conflict, the council member cannot participate. Council members must declare any contacts about this case with a member of the public. Council members must also declare if they have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. A council member who describes ex parte contacts or independent information shall state whether the contact has impaired his or her impartiality or ability of the member to vote on the matter. After the discussion of conflicts in ex parte contacts, any person may challenge the participation of a council member or rebut any statements made. The council member in question may respond to such a challenge.
Thank you. And with that, do any members of the council have a conflict of interest?
No.
Does any member of the council have any ex parte contact to disclose?
No.
All right. Assistant Planner Lena Smith, staff report.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Lena Smith, and I'm an assistant planner in the Community Development Department. Tonight, I'll be presenting on the Bull Mountain Summit annexation. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint, so I'll share my screen. Okay. So tonight's proposal is to annex 2 properties located on the north side of Southwest Bull Mountain Road into the city of Tigard. The applicant is not proposing any new development on the subject properties at this time, but the applicant intends to apply for a future subdivision application if the proposed annexation is approved. Because this future subdivision will connect to city sewer, this annexation is first required. City staff, including the engineering and public works departments, reviewed the applicant's proposal and determined there are adequate public facilities and services available to the subject site. Additionally, as detailed in the staff report submitted to council, the proposed annexation meets all applicable approval criteria in the Tigard Community Development Code, the Tigard Comprehensive Plan, Metro Code, and state statutes. On June 15th, the Planning Commission held a virtual public hearing on this application and unanimously recommended approval of this annexation to City Council. That concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, council, any questions? Not time for deliberation, but any questions on the staff report? Okay, we'll move on to public testimony. Deputy City Recorder Patton, was there any written public testimony?
Not on this item, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Mr. Nolip, are there any callers in the queue?
Well, Mr. Mayor, our second caller on the senior center remained in the queue, so I'm unsure that if they would like to provide comment on this section as well. So I can pass them through and we can find out.
Okay.
Hello, caller.
I do
Please
not
state your
have
name
any
for the
comment.
record. Okay, perfect. I'll
My
put
name
you back
is
in the
Fayez
queue.
Saud. Sorry.
No problem. You feel free to stay in there and listen if you'd like.
All right.
So, Mr. Mayor, that we have no additional callers.
Okay. I take it there's no response to testimony by staff. I will close the public hearing. And we'll go on to council discussion and consideration of ordinance number 20-07.
I move to approve ordinance number 20-07.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. City Recorder, please read the number and title of the ordinance.
Ordinance number 20-07, an ordinance annexing 2 parcels of land totaling approximately 1.8 acres and 1/2 of the adjoining Southwest Bull Mountain Road right-of-way, approving the Bull Mountain Summit annexation, ZCA 2020-00001, and withdrawing properties from the Tigard Water District, Washington County Enhanced Service Sheriff's Patrol District, and Washington County Urban Road Maintenance District.
City Recorder, please conduct a roll call vote.
Counselor Newton.
Yes.
Counselor Loeb.
Yes.
Counselor Anderson.
Yes.
Mayor Snyder.
Yes.
Council President Goodhouse.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 20-07 is adopted unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to item number 5, an update on senior housing alongside the Tigard Senior Center.
Is now exiting.
It's our new friend. I'm used to it now, Nolip. You don't even have to coach me through it. All right, Mr. Fairley.
Good evening, Mayor Snyder and members of the Tigard City Council. My name is Sean Farley. I'm the city's redevelopment project manager, and I'm here tonight with Destin Verdun, who's the director of real estate development for Northwest Housing Alternatives. And I'm going to share my screen here. So we're happy tonight to provide you an update with the senior housing alongside the Senior Center project. And this is the location on this map. So we started working with NHA about a year ago. After a competitive process, we selected them. We've entered into a negotiating agreement, and we have been working with an advisory committee made up of representatives from the Senior Center, from the neighborhood, from the TCAC, and Councilor Anderson as well. We met 5 times, and we were about to start the next phase of public involvement at the Senior Center when COVID-19 hit. So we had to recalibrate a bit. We've been doing things like we mailed a newsletter to 2,300 addresses within a half mile of the project to inform people about it, and included a postage-paid postcard for people to respond to. On June 25th, we held a Zoom webinar in collaboration with AARP and NHA. We talked about the benefits of age-friendly housing and this project in particular. And the recording is on our website if you care to watch it. So this is the basic site plan. It's been tweaked a little bit. Destin's going to talk a little bit more about the project details. But first I wanted to address, why senior housing on this site? We think it's a really great site with a lot of potential, very close to the Tigard Public Library, and very close to our walkable downtown core. It's near Panther Creek Park and Trail. Being alongside the Senior Center offers opportunities for collaboration and support from the Senior Center programs and the Meals on Wheels services there. The city would be contributing its property at no cost in a 99-year lease. This would allow the apartments to rent for less, and that'll help address the affordable housing crisis that's gripping the region and the country. It also offers seniors an opportunity to age in place and continue to live in Tigard. And it also furthers the city's commitment to address past inequitable outcomes in our housing policies. Under past zoning practices, most of the residential land in Tigard was unavailable for housing that would be affordable to lower income residents, who are often seniors. And so the city was responsible for some of this common suburban equitable housing policy, and this project would help correct that. So I'm going to turn it over to Destin now to get into more details of the project.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. We are so excited about this project. This is exactly the kind of work that NHA likes to do, the amazing synergy with the Tigard Senior Center, the ability to utilize urban land so well for the benefit of the seniors and the affordable tenants. We will be bringing new services to the community in the housing, as well as utilizing the senior center more effectively by bringing more people that can utilize their services. We're very excited about that. We're also excited about the opportunity to improve the site. We're pedestrian connection from the street down to Fano Creek to be protected and accessible through the site. Currently, people have to move through the parking lots in order to get there. We'll be improving pedestrian travel routes inside the site and also the parking lots as well for their safety and also efficiency in the effort. We are proposing currently 57 one-bedroom affordable apartments for the site, and we are talking about restricting them to seniors aged 62 and older, earning very low incomes. We have an application into Washington County Metro Bond, which requires that 40% of the apartments be at very low incomes, and we have proposed that they would have project-based subsidy, which will assure that the seniors will pay no more than 30% of their income on rent, which means they have got more money for food and medicine and life in general. We're also proposing that 5 of those apartments would be available to veterans through a BASH program. We are doing something pretty unique here. We're making every single apartment fully accessible to allow people to age in place. There is a minor upcharge associated with it, but we believe it's really important for seniors to be able to age in place and have full access to their facilities. We will be improving community outdoor space by providing seating areas and drop-off areas for the site. We will be adding a community room with a teaching kitchen that will be utilized by people of the senior center or additional facilities for outside parties. It will have a computer center with high-speed internet access through Wi-Fi to the whole building. We will have laundry facilities on site so that the seniors won't have to travel remote for that kind of activity. We are working on providing activity space on the top floor. In the rendering that was shown a few minutes ago, you might have noticed that the building steps down the hillside, allowing us to get views out to Fano Creek. We want to take advantage of those views. And we will have a full-time on-site property manager to oversee the housing and make sure that it is operating well and people are happy with its integration with the community. And we'll have resident services offices that people can seek out both information about services and supports, but also have one-on-one time with our resident services staff. We know that parking is an issue in this location, and we will be working on developing a parking management plan. I've done this very successfully on other projects. It means that we will have placards handed out to a limited number of residents and marked parking spaces with hourly usage requirements associated with them. The housing will have security cameras so we can monitor the usage if for some reason there's a problem. And we are excited about the fact that this is such an incredible opportunity to utilize shared parking. The senior center gets most of its business between about 9 and 2 in the afternoon, whereas if people are having vehicles, they would typically be going off to do their jobs and then coming back in the evenings. And so there's a synergy in parking usage to reduce the need for parking. But I do want to underscore that the residents will be 62 years and older, and they will be of extremely low income, so we will be encouraging them not to own cars. Cars are obviously a very costly endeavor to maintain and own on it. We also firmly believe that this is an incredible transit location, that it is close to mass transit and mass transit that's coming, and it is obviously close to the City Hall and the library for activities, Bannow Creek for park activities. And we will also have van service, which will take people to shopping, recreational activities, healthcare activities, things of that nature. NHA provides homeless and resident services in our properties. We will have an employee of Northwest Housing Alternatives as the resident services provider, so they will always be fully integrated with the facility. We have a senior health and housing program, which we actually go out and get grants to fund, and it helps residents age in place, maintain their health and wellness, and keep stable in their housing, things like energy grants, things of that nature. It's offered to all residents in the property, but is entirely voluntary. Nobody is forced to use our resources and our activities. Next slide. So obviously, when we talk about transportation resources and services is one of the primary things for getting seniors out to engage with their community. Access to the healthcare as well is very, very critical. The socialization and recreation opportunities here are immense because of its location. We're very excited about that. We will have activities both on and off site that we can take people to. We currently serve about 850 older adults statewide, so we feel like we know the population pretty well and the needs of the population. But we do also directly involve the residents in the program design, and we also have a resident advisory council, actually primarily of seniors that are constantly advising us and improving our services and activities. Our timeline is that we have a funding application in again for the Metro bond. If we were to hear back in success of that, we would proceed with the DDA and get approval to proceed with the development. We would work forward for about 9 to 12 months on detailed design and construction documents and apply for permits and hopefully be under construction in about 12 months, 12 to 14 months. Construction should take about 12 to 14 months as well. It is a tight site, so it'll take a little bit of logistics. And then we would typically lease up for the seniors, and it would take about 4 to 6 months. We start about 2 months before construction is complete, leasing up our properties. So we are super excited about the project, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, council, questions or comments? And I guess, Mr. Fairley, can you tee up the purpose of tonight's conversation? I mean, I've taken it so far that this is a briefing, but are there questions for the council, or is this just intended to be informational? Can you clarify?
Yeah, this is informational. It's an update. We hadn't brought information to you since February. So we just wanted to update the council and let you know what's going on. There will be a development agreement, disposition and development agreement, and lease that will be brought to you in the near future, depending on the outcome of their funding application. So that would be an official action request from you.
And can you, Mr. Fairley, can either one of you comment on, this has continued to be a topic that's gotten a lot of public comment, or particularly large number of questions and comments from a relatively small number of individuals. Can you report out whether those individuals are now at least maybe understanding of and have received answers to their questions and maybe satisfied isn't the right word, but at least have an understanding?
Yeah, there have been a lot of questions coming in, as you mentioned, from a smaller group. And we endeavor to give complete answers to those. So sometimes it might take a few days to get back, but we do answer all of them. And we, in fact, post the questions and the answers on our Engage website, which you can see the address there on the PowerPoint. Destin actually had a meeting on site to talk about the driveway access, and he talked to about, was it 14 people, Destin?
Yeah, I'd say about 12 to 14 people last Wednesday as well. We continue to engage. We continue to improve the site plan. We're evaluating another site plan right now to make some improvements to it, and we continue to listen. There's a lot of new subject matter keeps on being investigated for it. We keep on adapting and I think answering those questions as they come up. There is an Engage website as well for people to continue to engage. And like was said, we're writing responses and answering questions. There seems to be a lot of misunderstandings out there that we can help to explain.
All right, Councillor Newton, questions or comments?
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the pivot on getting the community engaged on this project. I know you've had to change your methods, and I appreciate you continuing to find ways to engage folks on this. And I appreciate the timeline. Looks like we'll actually be going through review, submitting the application, so to speak, and having it reviewed next year. So at that point, the community will be able to look at a completed application and comment on that. So that's a little bit different. And I have to say, my mom passed away about 13 years ago, but I can't help thinking that she would have been an ideal candidate because she lived in this area for years. She didn't drive for the last 20 years of her life, but she was active. She took the bus everywhere. And so, I know this is a great project. It's 57 units, and I think we have to think about how we accommodate seniors and other folks in need of affordable housing. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation, but I do think there is a population of seniors that would do well in this kind of environment. So I can't think of any questions or any more comments, so I'll let it go there. Thanks.
Youth Councillor Calderon, any questions or comments?
Yeah, just to comment on this, I was going to say, similar to Councillor Newton, that I think that this is incredibly important because my grandparents are getting up there in years, and I know that they would probably love to live in a place like this because I know that both sets of my grandparents, they love to go to the senior center, but all the friends talk about, or they tell me that all the friends talk about that it is sometimes difficult to access these services. So I think it's incredibly important to have it accessible to a lot of people, and I think that the senior housing will make it so much better for the seniors in our community.
Thank you. Councillor Lube.
Yeah, I would just echo some of the comments already said that I think it's an incredibly cool project to be able to provide some additional housing for our seniors. I really like that 5 are set aside for veterans. I think that's a really important demographic that sometimes can get missed, and so it's nice to see those pointed out. And I also know with citizen engagement, it's been, difficult. There are some very passionate residents out there regarding a couple of the areas. And, your team has been great as far as responding and pivoting the project in order to accommodate requests when possible. So thank you for that.
Councillor Anderson.
Well, this is a great project. I mean, we've just got an A+ team on this. And Dustin's group is, spearheading it, but the architects and the construction folks, just great. The synergy with the senior center is the key for this location. It is a difficult lot, to say the least, and they've moved the footprint a few times. Dustin, I've got just a couple questions about parking, and just yes or no. Will this current configuration, the footprint that you have, will it affect the church parking at all? And no. It looks like the flow for the Meals on Wheels is going to stay the same as it is now. Is that correct?
That is our intention. We are trying to research the size of the trucks that they're bringing into the site to make sure that we've got the right turning radiuses right now. It might mean that we need to move some parking spaces around in order to accommodate the truck all the way to the back of the site at this point.
Well, it's pretty tight now, frankly. And And just to be clear, it will not impact the church parking lot.
It will not impact the church parking lot in any way. And the movement of the truck into the site will be better because we're going to make better fire truck access into the site. So their delivery trucks will have better access to the front site.
Great, thank you.
Council President Goodhouse?
Yes, I'm pleased to hear about the more of the community engagement. I know that when I was on the committee that selected your organization, and that was part, I think, what one of the big reasons was is that we knew that would be a difficult project, and really it was going to need a lot of community involvement, engagement, and input. I do have just one question to delve a little deeper from what the mayor was saying. What are the comments or the responses now after doing more of the engagement from those that we did hear from? Are they still on the same message? Is it kind of died down? Can you give a feel of what it will be? And just kind of giving us an idea of what it will look like when we do make this final decision. Are a lot of those same people going to come with the same questions, or have a lot of those been kind of resolved through the outreach? Or is it still a work in progress?
Well, I will say that we're getting a lot of the same questions, so that's making answering the questions a little bit easier. But they revolve around the impacts of parking on the senior center. They revolve around the loss of some trees on this property, and a couple things. There's this continuing belief that the site's in the floodplain when we had a floodplain expert go out there and mark the boundary of it, and it is definitely not in the floodplain. I guess there's, just the number of parking spaces. There's kind of a feeling that that everyone who lives there is going to drive, and so that's going to create problems from the senior center. But as we said, a parking management plan for both the Tigard Senior Center and for the NHA building, along with access to transit. We actually learned by the bus that stops just steps away, the number 75 actually goes to Washington Square, goes to a grocery store, and the other way towards Tualatin goes to the large medical center down there. So that was good information. And then,
I think you're meaning the 76, right?
Yes, sorry about that, 76.
I just wanted, for the public that's watching, I want to make sure we're clear.
Thank you. And then the providing a van service. Yeah, so it's that, there's a belief that somehow the parking is going to spill over to the neighborhood. I don't think that's the case. We did have a positive meeting with the pastor of Northwest Christian Church, frank but positive meeting about the continuation of the existing parking agreement, and that agreement is only between the senior center and the church. No residents from this development would be parking there, and if they park there, they're subject to being towed. So we, they're going to take a wait and see attitude, but they, it was a good meeting.
Okay.
Sean, is there any way to condition people living there on not having a vehicle, or a certain number of residents not having vehicles?
I don't know if that's legally allowed, but I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Destin, but it'll probably be marketed as a place, where you may not expect to have your own parking spot, so you might want to sell your car, or share a car, or just rely on transit and the van pool and Lyft and Uber.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
All right, any other questions or comments? Or Mr. Fairley, have we accomplished what you were hoping to?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much for the updates and report out.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to item number 6 on the agenda, League of Oregon Cities legislative agenda. Management Analyst Hendricks, how are you?
Good, thanks. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nicole Hendricks. I'm the Senior Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office. And tonight I bring you the League of Oregon Cities list of potential topics for their 2021 legislative agenda. The LOC has asked for you to discuss which 4 out of the 26 topics identified by the League's committees you would like to see as priorities on their agenda. The topics listed span a wide variety of issues from franchise fees to COVID economic recovery, and that list was provided with the agenda item. And they also included a more in-depth description of each topic. Also, there's an option to write in a topic if you feel like there's something that we want to pursue that might be missing out of the list. And in terms of navigating the discussion, if you each want to provide your top 4 and then want to come together and reach a consensus, we just ask that after the discussion you move to approve a final 4. So thank you.
How Nicole, in the spirit of trying to move us forward, how different are these from I mean, I feel like we did this last year, and I have a suspicion, at least I think we did this last year. Was it 2 years ago?
I think it might have been 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
couldn't speak
I thought it was
to
last
how
year,
different it is.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wonder whether, I mean, if they've added topics, we should certainly consider those, but I'd be shocked if we were in a very different place than we were the last time we did this, given our priorities. But we can certainly go around. Has every council member reviewed the latest A through Z list? Okay. Well, let's just go around. Councilor Newton, what are your 4?
Okay, well, I struggled. I read this several times, and generally, rather than go through to a specific letter, it seemed to me that I was coming up with 4, I had 5, but I'll say 4, areas that I thought were the most challenging right now. First one is the COVID-19 economic recovery investments. I'm really concerned about our business community and our economy, and so I think that's important right now. The other thing I think we have an opportunity to address, because I believe our state senator, Jenny Burdick, is going to be chair of the finance committee, whatever they call that down there. So I think we might have a real chance at property tax reform this time. So I mark that one. I'm also concerned about mental health. So I feel like anything we can do to address those services. It sort of, it involves people getting through the COVID-19 situation. It spills over a little into some of the issues we're dealing with racial justice, and just the fact that mental health services have sort of fallen behind the 8 ball, I feel like, recently. So that's something I think we could do. And then being on the Cable Commission, I become more and more concerned with, I'll call it, internet inequity in our state, and especially with what we've had to see with students having to learn virtually this year. There's a lot of parts of our state that just don't have the Wi-Fi, the internet connections that they need to be in school virtually, or some of our businesses. So those are the 4. And then housing was also real close. I think if I wasn't on MAC, I probably would have put housing above the internet services. But that's also a concern I have too, is affordable housing. So sorry, Nicole, that's 5. Sorry.
Council President Goodhouse.
Okay, it was just unmuting. I have a couple of them, the same ones that Councilor Newton did, so I'll hit those ones where mental health, property tax reform, and COVID were 3 of the ones that Councilor Newton said. One of the ones where I differ, and I think is really important, is the infrastructure. I think there's a lot that needs to be done. I know there's a lot of movement going forward as far as the infrastructure bill. We have a lot of projects we needed done in Tigard, whether it be from money for the Southwest Corridor, for 99, 217, and just in general for projects we're doing around the city. I think that's a huge one, and it's also not only is it for getting development and things done in the city, but it's also a job creator for people in our region too. So not only can we get those projects done, but we can also help boost the economy in the area with those jobs, which will in a sense kind of piggyback with the COVID economic recovery. The way to get the recovery is to have jobs, and with jobs we have infrastructure projects that will, I think, help out that way.
All right, thank you. Tom, Councilor Anderson?
Well, we've got a theme here. Property tax reform and COVID, economic recovery investments, 1 and 2. I also had the broadband infrastructure, and COVID related, I had the water utility rate and fund assistance. I looked at the mental health service delivery, and I would want to wait and see how this big metro mental health wraparound services program is going to work. So that's why that wasn't on there. So those are my 4.
So Councilor Anderson,
yeah,
you referring to on broadband? I kind of assumed Councilor Newton was meaning, the way she spoke about it was E as in Edward, but what one are you thinking more of a, which one?
I was thinking about B. B as in boy.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Got it. All right, thank you. And Councilor Anderson, just to check myself, were you referring to E, Councilor Newton, with digital equity and inclusion?
Sorry, yes, but I was thinking more broadly. So I looked at all of them and kind of lumped them in categories. But yeah, originally I was looking at E. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm putting you back in a box for purposes.
That's fine. You go ahead and do that. I'm fine with that. Put me in a box.
And Mayor, just to jump in on that topic, because infrastructure, I know with being on the transportation infrastructure with the National League of Cities, sometimes broadband and those can fall into infrastructure. So I don't know if we start having a little bit of a theme if what we determine falls into those areas or not.
Youth Councilor Calderon?
Yeah, so mine's pretty similar to Councilor Newton's. But internet access is definitely a top priority, with everything being virtual, both for a lot of businesses and school being totally virtual, or at least it was in the spring. And then Q for mental health, because I know a lot of people are struggling being quarantined and distanced from others. And then K for climate change, because climate change is always one of my big concerns. And then obviously D for COVID recovery, because I know it's a very hard issue, especially for small and local businesses.
Thank you. Councilor Lube.
Yeah, I had a lot of the same similar things. I went with D, COVID economic recovery investment, H, housing and services investment, and long-term transportation infrastructure funding, and U, property tax reform. I looked at our federal and state agenda and sort of pulled out the big themes. The mental health aspect is really important, but I also I looked at the broadband and the digital equity, but I know that the state recently passed something where I know they're adding additional funds on cell phone bills to, I believe, help bridge the gap with rural internet access. And so I sort of felt like that had already been taken on. And I referenced, again, our federal and state agendas that we had previously set, which led the main direction of what I chose.
All right, so I only got to 3, which was D, U, and Q. And we had a lot of D. Almost everybody had, well, everyone had D, and 5 out of 6 had, I think, U, which is the property tax reform. So it seems like those 2 are for sure in D and U. And then let's talk about mental health service delivery. So Q, we had most everybody. Well, no, let me look at this. We had 4 of 6 put that there. Do we want to add that as a third one, and then we'll have to really work through the last one because we've got people kind of all over the place on the potentially the last one. But are people okay with adding mental health as well, since there were 4?
Mental health would have been the next item on my list, so I'm totally fine with it being added.
All right, so mental health will be added. So now the competition for, Nicole, they want us to vote for 4, is that right?
You don't have to vote for 4, so you could vote for less than 4 if you wanted to, but 4 is the max.
Mayor and council, in past years, you have sent more than 4 into the league. It's really just you know, there's more than just our city sending in their preferences, and they'll be also weighing the submittals. So,
do we want
I think
to
I
send
remember
them
that
all?
last year.
Yeah. Do we want to send them all then?
What's the remaining ones?
Let's see. The ones that did not, I can read them. Just give me a second. So, the ones that were at least mentioned were H for housing, E for digital equity and inclusion, infrastructure financing and resilience, water utility rate and fund assistance, broadband infrastructure and technical assistance, long-term transportation infrastructure funding, local climate action planning resources, and that's it.
What separates really? Oh, I guess there's long-term transportation and infrastructure financing. I would be fine with long-term transportation infrastructure funding. I don't know if how those two really differ between infrastructure on J and N.
Well, one of them is specific to transportation, and the other one is just more general and more resiliency oriented.
Yeah, that's where I thought with J might include some of those other parts with broadband and some of the other parts.
If we're just trying to stick to the 4, my argument would actually be for housing and services investment, because I think it does sort of a wraparound of the other services that we're talking about in our community for affordable housing, homeless assistance, and related services for all of those sorts of things. So for me, that felt like a much more broad topic.
Can everyone support that? Can anyone not support it?
Well, housing's big, obviously, but Metro passed a bond, so we'll have $80 million a year for the next 5 years for affordable housing. But throughout the state, it's still a problem. It's a problem in Medford and LeGrand. I mean, so yeah, I'd be fine with that.
I would. Good.
I would be too. That was my number 5.
That was only my thought was that we passed a bond on housing, and I know the big issue we're facing is the gas tax with more electronic vehicles and want to go to VMT and things like that. There has to be a big change on how we collect money for infrastructure, and that's coming up soon. Where if there's not a fix for that, there's going to be a big hole for funding infrastructure.
Why don't we put 5 in? We'll put housing and services investment and infrastructure financing and resilience. How about that?
Great.
And we're going to owe Youth Councilor Calderon something because we basically just ignored some of his. So I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. Don't.
And it's not lost on me, but these are difficult decisions. Okay. Nicole, do you have what you need?
Yes, I do. Thank you for discussing that.
No problem. We have lots of passion on those topics. All right, City Manager Wine, we'll move on to the next item, number 7, discuss racial justice and city action.
Mr. Mayor, I don't have any prepared comments for this item tonight. This has been a standing agenda item for the council over the last several weeks, and last week you brought forward a draft proposal for a transformation commission focused on racial equity, and I thought that what you wanted to do tonight was maybe discuss the status of that proposal. So I will leave this to you.
Okay. I'm prepared to take more comments on this point. I also would like to give the police chief and the city attorney the opportunity to speak briefly if they'd like. They've both provided comments and feedback to me along with the Tigard Police Officers Association, and I can share those comments as well. I have taken point by point the feedback from both the city attorney and the police chief and tried to make decisions and revise the document into a third version based on feedback that they've given. Some of the feedback I accepted, some of it I didn't, usually for good reason. I had a good reason. They may not agree, but there was at least some method to the madness. And then the Tigard Police Officers Association as well has asked to provide more formal written comment, but they would really like to see things categorized into, things that Tigard doesn't even do now. They just are concerned that this reflects potentially poorly. Some of these questions reflect poorly on them because of the appearance that we may do things that we don't even do. We don't do now, and so why is our community needing to discuss them? So I've tried to reframe some of those, but they're going to be providing more formal feedback. But Chief McAlpine, do you want to give just some brief comments? And I know you had a new thought earlier today you may want to share.
Well, yes. First and foremost, I want to thank you for the opportunity to have a robust conversation yesterday that lasted over about an hour and a half. And I do believe you allowed me to be very honest in my input. And so thank you for that. I won't go into depth with it, but for the rest of the council, I would just say, and I know that, Mayor, you heard me, again, the national narrative, it has shocked the country. It is a very important conversation, and very much the Black Lives Matter movement is very important here. And what I've asked, and we heard a little bit under the qualified immunity, is just reminding everybody that across our country, laws and policing is different. And I just would ask for really on the behalf of the police department that we are measured by what we do, or given the opportunity, just like you did a couple weeks ago on the 8 Can't Wait, where we were at 7 out of 8, and I would probably argue 8 of 8. But just a reminder, and I think you were very gracious in saying, absolutely, this is about the national narrative. This is no implication of Tigard Police needs immediate reform. It's just such an important topic that our community wants to talk about. It wants to understand what we do here. And I relish the opportunity to be able to not only show the progression that we have come through, but also to have an honest dialogue, because there are still areas where we can improve. And so again, just want to say thank you for the opportunity. And the one thing I know that you really want this to be a public safety transformational, but I will just advocate again with my peers as we talk about this. We also know there are other areas we would like to delve into and have opportunities. And while my peers are probably glad that I'll take the first run at this, I think they hope that there will be opportunities to have some dialogues in maybe their area where they're the lead. So I'll just advocate for that as well. And Mayor, if I had another thought that was so many hours ago, unless you want to prompt me, I don't know if I said it.
I honestly don't. I don't specifically recall. My prompt was that I was supposed to give you an opportunity to speak.
Oh, I do know. I did remember. The only other thing that I would ask is that perhaps you would consider adding to that list maybe 2 counselors on that. I think it is important to hear all the information that's going to be discussed, also understand what is in your area and what's not. And I know that some models around the country, to include Eugene, does have counselors attached to a commission. So if you would do that, and possibly the other one is if you want to expand the 5 to 1 or 2 more, I would, I think there is a need to add LGBTQ community, and also maybe an opportunity in the faith-based, because we do hear concerns from either our religious groups that feel like they are maybe not well served, or fear of coming to the police department, as well as our LGBTQ. And if that means expanding it a little bit, I'm all for that, because I think some of the topics are going to be pertinent to them as well.
So I've made notes about that. This is going to be challenging from a functional size of a group. I think 12 is already as big as it can be, but we'll take the feedback and try to figure out how to deal with that. And yes, so just from the time we last talked to now, you've gone from 1 counselor to 2 city councilors?
Well,
or are you
City
bargaining?
Attorney Rajala might share, but knowing a little bit more about Eugene's model and the growing pains, but where they are today, did show 2. And why reinvent the wheel if we know there's a model out there that has shown success? So I would welcome 2 of you to join me in these conversations.
All right, City Attorney Rajala.
So to follow up on what the chief said, I did have a lengthy conversation with the police analyst assigned to staff the Eugene Police Commission today. It was very interesting to see how their commission worked. It was established in the late 90s as a result of, or coming out of, some pretty rough times that Eugene was having then, in terms of relationships between the community and the police department. So he defined it, or he explained it a couple times by calling it a release valve. So I think it's important to clarify that their commission came about as a significantly different, based on significantly different facts than we have here. They had a lot of distrust with their community and police department, and that's absolutely not the case for the majority of Tigard. But listening to how it has progressed and evolved over the years, it is viewed as a success by the police department, by the community, the public. It was really encouraging to hear him talk about it, and they've done a lot with it. I think you can tell that he's very passionate about what he does on the commission and what the commission does. So like the chief said, there's definitely something to be said for not recreating the wheel. I think it was a helpful conversation to see how another community has done it. So I'm happy to forward along more information that I got from him. But I think it's important to consider different options as we move ahead with creating something for Tigard.
Thank you. I do want to make sure that the Tigard Police Officers Association feedback is heard by the council as well before they deliberate, and so I'll just summarize that. They want the activities that will be reviewed categorized into 4 categories. 1, items that are not practiced at the Tigard Police Department, items that are beyond the scope of change at the city or Tigard Police level due to state or federal law. Section 3, items that are already being changed at either the state or federal level. And Section 4, items that we as a city of Tigard and Tigard Police Department can affect change on. They also, I think I stated this, but I'll share it again. They had concerns that if a citizen were to read my first draft, which is why it was a first draft and why we're getting feedback about it, that people could get a false belief, or the public in Tigard could get a false belief that all the topics that are presented are things that we as a department currently or recently have participated in or are common practice. We know that some of the topics presented in the document are not currently nor past practice as far back as anybody can recall. So they have concerns about that. They're going to give us more specific feedback as well, I think, in that reorganization that they're proposing. With that, let's go to Council President Goodhouse. What, you want to start with your feedback?
Yes, thank you. One line I have just to make a change to, it would be the under the background, the third bullet point. I see just leaving improve the lived experience of all persons of color in Tigard, and then striking the rest of it. I just see a couple things with that. Either one, it might just distract from the conversation of what's trying to be done, but also if we're trying to change things, why do we want to go by a standard? Maybe the whole new way of what life may be, or the perceived way might be a total different way. But I just see that might be a point of contention, that people might say that, you know, there's different levels of what people might see someone as. And if you do a comparison, I think the statement by itself is strong to say improve the lived experience of all persons of color in Tigard is a strong statement on its own.
We would probably need to change the beginning of that sentence, because that would make that sentence no longer factually true, because the challenge I issued on June 3rd was what it was. But we can look at changing the other part of the sentence to make it still true.
Yeah, I usually, my belief a lot of times when you're trying to talk about a topic or work on something, why take a point that might take it into a different direction that would distract from the main focus? And the main focus is to improve the lived experience of all persons of color in Tigard. And with something like that, everyone can get behind that, as opposed to maybe that's distraction, or maybe that's not even what the people of color may want to be, as far as what's existing or what they see now. So I think it kind of takes in a different direction, or it might be open for contention, or there might be many different things.
Okay. We'll get other people or other counselors' comments on that, then please be prepared to comment on what you think about that. No matter what, if we change it, we'll have to fix the front of the sentence to do something different. Okay, Council President Goodhouse, other comments?
And then just one other one, and this might just be for the committee to work on. But I don't know where the police fall on this one, but the only one really jumped out at me is stop making traffic stops for violations. To me, that would be almost a radical change in the way things are done, especially if you're trying to, traffic stops usually lead to other things, especially DUIs and so forth. And how would you still enforce, if you pulled someone over because they were swerving, but instead you saw someone swerving, you just sent them a ticket, but you smelled the alcohol in their breath, or maybe it might be a thing where if someone's just taking a picture, it might lead to more police time, more court time, or it might lead itself to maybe more prejudice of someone just seeing a vehicle and taking a picture. So
are you wanting to rewrite that or remove that entire section?
I mean, I would either remove it, or I don't know what a rewrite look like. I think that, and maybe a little bit more comments on why that'd be more of a, I don't know the background on why that may be or not more of an issue, but I think other aspects of recorded stops, body cams, things like that can really solve those situations.
The question here, and what we're trying to get at, and maybe it should be reframed completely, and Police Chief, if you're still listening, maybe you'll have a suggestion here. The purpose of this is to get our sworn police officers out of very dangerous situations when maybe they don't need to be. Traffic stops are historically one of the most, that and responding to domestic violence are the most dangerous activities that an officer frequently encounters. And so, like, the question being asked here, and the reason it's on the list is, do we even, to accomplish our goals, which in this case would be enforcing moving violations, which are not crimes. We're not talking traffic crimes here. We're talking about, basic violations that end up getting a citation and end up with a court date. Do we need to put the public in the form of a traffic stop with a police officer? Like, do we even need to have that encounter? And are there other encounters like this that we could do differently that will put our officers at less risk and put the public at less risk? That's what this is trying to get at. Now, maybe it shouldn't be about traffic stops per se, but that was, for me, it was a good example of something to say to try to be somewhat provocative and get us to think about, like, do we even need to do this way anymore? Like, and why are we doing it this way?
Yeah.
Mayor, if I may answer your question, you know, and you're right. Just because it's on that list doesn't mean that we can or cannot talk about it. Just from a logistical, practical point of view, there are a lot of people. The number one complaint in this community, but also in my previous one, is traffic. When I know there's, and I'll just use Tacoma, when it was always violent crimes, but when I go to neighborhoods, all they talked about was traffic. And so it's a version of livability that people have come to expect, a certain safety that comes with people adhering to the rules of the road. So it would have to be a fundamental shift of an entire community that would say, you know, it's a free-for-all, and good luck with everything. But again, I get what you're saying. And that might be 34 years of experience where I just can't quite give it up. But, you know, anyway, I would have a concern that if we went down that road, that we would definitely want to hear from a lot more of the community on that topic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I want to make sure I'm being heard and understood, because what you just said, and part of what Council President Goodhouse is saying, is not, like, this has nothing to do with no longer enforcing something. This is about fundamentally and radically changing the way we enforce it. In my mind, every single person, or maybe more people, would end up with violations this way than they would otherwise. So I guess I need to make sure maybe what's written here is not communicating this well, because the intent here is not at all to do less enforcement. It's to change the way we're doing the enforcement. And I don't think there's any benefit to stopping a vehicle in a neighborhood, putting 2 people at risk and writing them a citation for 10 over, versus them getting the same citation in the mail. I guess I just need to understand, like, maybe this isn't, Councilor Lube, help me here. You look like you want to say something useful.
Yeah, I just want to respond with a personal experience where I was speeding in high school. And I got pulled over by a police officer, and I was terrified. And the police officer, we talked through it, and he let me go because of the interaction that we had. He understood that it was more powerful in that moment to have that discussion with me than it would have ever been to me to randomly get a citation. And I understand that's not the situation that everyone has in a traffic stop, but I know for me that moment was much more impactful, having that conversation with that officer, than one day just getting the citation in the mail would have been.
Okay. And I agree with that. It kind of, you know, sometimes we can't remember what we had for a conversation in the morning, and so kind of to that point that Councilor Lube was saying, that if I got if a young person got a citation 30 days later in the mail, they may not remember what they even did as far as going through a stop sign or what violation. And I also just wonder too, how then we'll enforce DUIs or even catch a DUI, or how do we, many of the traffic stops that we do that do they need that at the in moment interaction, how do we replace that? I understand where you're coming from, though. Is there ways that we can do a paradigm shift, and just because it's been done this way, is there ways to do something different? But I'm just also worried about the ramifications that would happen if, just shooting pictures. I mean, people already are upset with red light cameras in a couple locations of the speed on green. What would it be like if everything was automated?
I would like to clarify my comment that I'm not saying I'm not in support of having the conversation, because I think a lot of the stuff that is proposed in this Transformation Commission is also about having the conversation and the education piece of it. I'm saying that I think I would support maybe rewriting the question as far as exactly what you're trying to answer.
Thank you for volunteering to rewrite the question. I appreciate that, Councilor Lube. And I also want to clarify that so Council President Goodhouse, just so you understand, I picked my words very carefully here, and actually, I guess City Attorney Rajala, based on one of your comments, in writing, I just want to point out the word violation was very specifically used here. a DUI and even suspicion of a DUI is investigating a traffic crime, which is not a violation and not at all what the intent of this is about. So clearly, my communication here on this one has not worked for the majority of the public. So, or even this team. So I appreciate that. Councillor Lube is going to graciously offer some alternative language. And Council President Goodhouse, did you have more on this on this, or can we go to another councillor?
Yeah, move on, please.
Okay. Well, we've been on so much here. Youth Councillor Calderon, have you gotten to speak yet?
I have not. I have quite a few things that I've written down. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have a chance to say it all, but like Councillor Goodhouse said before, I would caution against the white man thing, because I do agree that that would likely invite debate, and that would probably draw away from the actual conversation at hand, and I can see that community members would likely get caught up in that language, which isn't even the intent of the commission. Next thing is that in the public comment that we received regarding the commission, I know that they pointed out that they do not feel that the commission would accurately represent all of Tigard. I actually do not agree with that statement. I think that the commission is very diverse and that would have a good amount of perspectives. And I would like to consider the expansion of the 5 community members to possibly a couple more. I wouldn't want to have that many more, but just to make sure to include faith-based and LGBTQ plus community members, because they are also sometimes very marginalized by the police in this aspect. And then along with the Tigard Police Association said, I think it would be important to have distinctions between what the city already does, what the city can't do, and what the city has not already been doing, because I know even when reading through the list, I was not completely sure what the city of Tigard does. So I think it would be important to have maybe a short explanation of what happens, and that could also help clarify things like Councillor Goodhouse brought up with the intent of the traffic stop violation. So I think maybe a brief description of why you included it on the list would be very helpful to everyone's understandings on why the question is there. And I think that's all I have for now.
So Youth Councillor Calderon, I do have a question and follow up on that. We could add the community members that are being represented. We could include, LGBTQ plus, faith-based, etc., and not increase the number past 5. Are you suggesting both things? Do you think the number needs to be more than 5, and if so, how many more?
I was making that part of a suggestion. I don't know, or I'm unsure if I think that 5 is good, but I can understand reasoning as to why people would want to raise it, but I believe 5 is good, and that we should have the faith-based and LGBTQ plus person included in that 5.
Okay. All right. Councillor Anderson.
Well, actually, I thought that this was going to be kind of a temporary commission, but are we talking of a permanent type of ongoing thing?
I'm not, but that was at least I think the discussion of the Eugene thing might be more of a permanent thing, but that's not what my proposal had been. You could modify that by suggesting.
Well, I think if the commission has more to talk about, I think we could continue it. I would say you could add a few more people, maybe up to 15, because not everybody's going to be able to show to all these meetings, and that's kind of the way it works. But I think this is great. I think it prompts. I think everything is here to promote discussion. It doesn't need to be perfect. I'm glad the police chief weighed in. I'm Obviously, the police are going to have strong opinions about some of these topics, and rightfully so. And they'll dispel or affirm, what's going on, and kind of get it out there for the conversation. So I think it's a nice document. Kudos to you.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Lube.
Yeah, so I have a couple of things. I actually, in regards to the commission makeup, I like the idea of adding the LGBTQ plus and the faith-based. And as I was going through it, I was actually recognizing that we have a segment of our community that's not being represented in here. And the business community, contributes to the police department through the funding of the commercial crimes unit. And the police, do a significant amount of work with our businesses. So I was actually wondering if it had been thought of, or what other councilors think about adding a spot for like a Tigard Chamber of Commerce designee to represent that business idea and insight. I just sort of felt like that was a group of people that we were missing out on. Another thing that I wanted to sort of talk about, I know that the SROs are listed in here, and it sort of feels like specifically with the SRO situation that we don't have quite enough student representation, or also representation from more stakeholders regarding, and I know I think it's turning out to be a different conversation, but I'm also, because it's in this document, I want to address it and make sure that there's additional student representation, and that there should also be Tigard High School educator or admin. The leadership teacher has been mentioned as a good resource to me to make sure that's in there, since it's something that really directly impacts them. And then there were two areas I actually thought about it might be important to add to the discussion, as discussion topics, as to explore what kind of community we want to be. The first is Tigard police participation in TriMet. I know a couple of cities have pulled their participation in TriMet, and in theory it's expense neutral because we get reimbursed. But one of the cities I was talking to, the termination of the contract ended up being a philosophical one. And I think that's an important one for our city to have if we want to participate in that sort of way, in that sort of program. And then the other thing I thought about is a program for our students that we used to have that was pulled budgetarily a couple of years ago, and that's Peer Court. From my understanding, it was actually quite a successful program, and I was wondering if that was something that may be worthwhile to be put back in. So those were the things that I wanted to add.
Thank you. On the SROs, and maybe I didn't, and maybe we need to just say more. I'll make a note to add more. We need to add what is happening, because I kind of just, in this document, I was trying to punt on the fact that we already have a process we're working on with the school district that's very inclusive and involves a lot of students. But to your point, Councilor Lube, this document just says there's already a process and doesn't really talk about it. So City Manager Wine, maybe you can provide a section that we could add there, like just a summary that could go into the SRO part.
Will do, yes.
And I hope your phone is okay.
Was a glass of water.
Oh, it was oh my goodness.
Oh, that's even worse.
Go do what you need to do. I mean, I'm sorry. Okay, Councilor Newton, are we on to you?
I guess so, and I'm madly taking notes so I can respond to everything everybody said, but I might have missed something. First of all, where you added the comment that I made about could focus direct certain types of policing activities, I meant that to go on the section above. We were talking about we don't want people to be feeling like, using pretext to stop people of color for something they would never stop a close family member for, jaywalking, taillight, something like that. And I was thinking in that regard, if the police, their call, working with, the kind of activity, I remember when I worked there was a lot of issues with cell phones. So if the police decide they're going to do a focused enforcement on a safety issue they're concerned about, then they look at it that way rather than, so they're really, if they're going to target something, they're looking at something that's related to safety in the community. So that's kind of what I was thinking.
So do I need to move your comment, or did I
Yes.
make it in the wrong spot? Where is it supposed to go?
It
So
goes
this is
in the section above.
So this is so this is comment that's listed as, since I made it, JS11. Is that the right
Correct.
one?
Correct.
Okay.
That
And
was
you
the-
want that one's supposed to go above. Okay,
Above,
sorry.
correct.
Sorry. Okay.
That's okay. The other thing I was thinking about was listening to the qualified immunity discussion, which I thought was really great and really informative. I was wondering, kind of a combination of what the police union's talking about in terms of how we group the topics, but also maybe one of the first things we need to get people, like, for example, on qualified immunity, maybe there needs to be a presentation about what that is and how it applies. Body cameras, what's the status in Tigard? What are we doing on body cameras? So maybe the folks on the commission would benefit from some sort of information education about the topic. And I think what might be happening is the way this reads, maybe people aren't getting that sense that, okay, first of all, we'd have the topic.
I think that has to happen on every single topic.
Correct. Exactly. So I'm just thinking it may be a little bit the way it's presented. So that's what I think the intent was. It just may not read that way. So that's just the point. The membership, I think more representation is good, but I also think we do want to be careful about the numbers, because having facilitated a lot of groups, it does get hard when they get too large. But I think having it be as reflective of the community as we can is important.
How do you feel about 15?
Well, I wouldn't go over 15. I like 12, but if you feel like 15, I sure wouldn't go over that, though. That's kind of the outer limit. But in order to get,
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But in order to get the representation, I think that would be fine. The SRO issue, I think you raised a good point, Mayor. I mean, I think the commission may be discussing it, but I think there's a lot of work underway now that I hope is going to be, help us address that issue as we move forward. With regard to the area under that comment I made about stop making traffic stops, I think maybe what we're talking about from the conversation is traffic safety stops in terms of the situations officers get into, to your point. So is there a discussion that needs to happen about, some of these interactions I've seen, I only watch it because it's just so heartbreaking. I can only watch it for so long, but some of these things that you see where traffic stops don't go well, I mean, is there something that the community needs to understand about that the police department, the police officers need to articulate about that? Are there processes that might need to change in regard to that? So to your point about safety, officer safety and community safety in that regard, that might be the topic that we're really looking at. A couple of more things that were brought up, the representation business community. TriMet, I think, is another one where we probably should open that up so the community can understand, what that relationship is about, what the purpose is, and see, where we want to take it from there. I mean, I'm very familiar with Peer Court. I think it's a good program, but I'm wondering if it might want to be broadened in terms of, youth in our community. That's, as this commission talking about, I know Youth Councilor Calderon talked about it a little, but, with SROs, with Peer Court, what about our youth community of color, and what's their interaction, and what things might they find important or valuable as we're moving forward? So maybe that's a topic that the commission could also explore.
Maybe the commission could delegate some of that to the Youth Advisory Council.
Yeah. Anyway, that might be another important issue for them to tackle. And I think I've hit everything, unless you note something, Mr. Mayor, that I didn't answer.
No, I think you got it, and I've made all the notes. I guess my question now to the council is, with all the edits that were just provided, and Heidi, you owe me some stuff, Marty owes me some stuff, language-wise, is this now at a point where you all are comfortable enough with the concept that we push it out to the public for comment more broadly, or are we not ready for that?
Well,
Mayor,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to circle back. I had two more little things since I was going for along in the beginning. One thing, and Councilor Newton kind of hit on it, and it kind of piggybacks off what the police union was saying, is I wonder if we maybe also categorize what things can be done at the city level, state level, and federal level. So maybe people going into this can realize these might be topics that we can or cannot do. So I don't know if that might be too much categorized as far as what we are and aren't doing now, but also what level these decisions can be made at. So someone doesn't see this document and think, okay, well, why didn't you fix that? It might be a good way to answer the questions before they're asked, as far as why is this not being done at the city, and it can be stated this is a federal level, or this has to be done at the Supreme Court, or et cetera.
Some of the reason I've not done that yet, and maybe we will be able to get there, and maybe between TPOA, the council's feedback, the city attorney, we can get there. But part of my concern is that when we go into situations, I'm just going to say this, when we go into a bunch of topics that the public want to talk about and that there are concerns about, when we walk in and we start with, oh, by the way, we can't do this on our own, like this is, and there's not only no dialogue, but I think we all as city councilors have experienced times when pushing on a point and asking why, many times over, you get to a different answer. And so I'm concerned that by doing some of that, we're already putting our own bias and sticking ourselves into situations or into corners where it may not be truly as either black and white or only can be changed at the federal level. I mean, the question I would be asking if I were one of the city council representatives on this or on part of the group is, well, why can't we change it? Or more importantly, what parts of this on the margin can we change in Tigard? Instead of just saying a topic is completely, it's in the category of we can't change it. I mean,
and that kind of goes back with my comment, I think, from last week, was that I agree that we can change it. It might be something we can't make the decision, but we can find out what our community wants, and then we can take it to those areas we want to, and we can fight as a city to get those changed. So maybe that'd be these where they fall into the levels, and this is what the effort that we'll do as a city, if this is what's important to the city, is we'll take it to the state or federal level with that. So maybe it's a conjunction of those two. Melding those two, because I agree with you too. Is just because you say you can't do it, I'm not one to fall into that. Just because someone says you can't do it, I'm all for doing it if it's the right thing to do. So maybe we look at how to word that. But I just don't want to have someone have the thought that look at us and say, well, you as a city asked for this, but now you're not making those changes.
And Mr. Mayor, I was thinking in terms of as we explain or summarize the issue, we could say, I'm not summarizing this correctly, but qualified immunity, that's different state to state. So as we explain the issue, we can say that's a federal requirement or whatever. We're not saying we can't change it. We're just, as we're educating folks, we can, that's a local ordinance or whatever. So people have an understanding. I think it provides some context. I would never discourage our community from looking at us and saying, well, it's a federal law and I think you ought to advocate to change it. That's important.
Yeah. So. And also what's important is what could we change on the fringe around it? Like it may be a federal law, but we can also choose to, do certain things. We can still act, and it's not just about advocacy sometimes.
Right.
So I guess that's what I don't want lost in this. But Councilor Newton, you're bringing up, I think, a big and important question that I'm now going to pose to the city attorney and to the police chief, if they're still on the line, is whether or not, or perhaps we should have before each of the sections topic areas, I should say, that the that we add both a section from the city attorney and police chief that describes kind of the current state in Tigard and how much control does the city have on each of these topics. Should that be added to this document before it goes public?
Shelby, would you like to go first?
I was just going to ask you the same thing. I can go first. We did have a discussion about education being important yesterday. That's something that we all agreed on our call was really important because, yes, these are super complicated issues, some of them, and we can't have an informed conversation without education coming first. So I absolutely agree that that would be a requirement.
I think I tried to think about a visual report card, something that I could go through these topics and say where we're at and what the state has already passed in police accountability in years past, and then also what they're undertaking now, and how do I present it, and sometimes the value is in the conversation itself. And so I think in your intro, when you talk about education first, assessing, basically it's the current state analysis of where we are today, and at some point being able to give an overview, I think would be helpful, but not stymie the conversation, but just allowing us an opportunity to say, this is what your state does currently, which does a lot of things, but also this is what we've done as an accredited agency. But here's areas definitely where I am reaching out for some assistance as well.
But so I'm not hearing you say that a section should be added right now to this. I mean, I didn't hear either of you respond, yes, we want to add a section, a line or two leading on what the current status is in Tigard and or how much control we have, or do you want to do that? I guess I'm offering that as a potential before we make it public. Would you want to do that or not?
Sure, I would be happy to do so.
Okay. Okay, then we're going to have to all work really hard to get this out by the end of the week because there's a lot of work to do here.
And Mayor, I have one last clarifying question. And this is just through the whole process. I know when this you first had this idea, you'd mentioned that you wanted to just focus on the Black community, but then in the language it says the members persons of color. So are we talking all persons of color, or are we focusing only on the Black community with this?
No, that's been edited and modified based on feedback from last week actually, and others. Both actually members of the Black community gave feedback about that. Youth Councilor Calderon gave feedback about that last week, and that's been changed.
Okay.
Based on that feedback. But that does bring me back actually to the point that about the original statement that I made, and I'm just thinking through this. This is the third bullet, the improve the lived experience of all persons of color in Tigard. My challenge with leaving it that way, and notice that it was the words that were chosen in the full sentence were very purposeful. We're not saying that the lived experience should be that of a white male, but that the safety and privilege would be as enjoyable as the white male's privilege currently is today. And I recognize that that's clearly struck a chord with multiple folks for maybe similar reasons that we should just take that out, and I'm okay with that. I guess I just want to make sure you all understand that that really waters down the level of meaning that that sentence has. Because it goes from saying, like, improving the lived experience of all persons of color in Tigard, to me, is a really weak statement. Because you know what? I could improve it 0.5%, and I've met that objective. And, I debated a lot about how to state what I was trying to state there, and it actually came out of my statement once, and then a new version was inputted back in. It's certainly not an easy. I'm not going to say it's an easy choice, and we can take it out of this for this purpose. but it was done intentionally, and it was done to try to make sure that it's clear that the objective is to dramatically move the needle on this and not incremental, minimalist types of improvement. So maybe we can say it differently and not incite, heartache that doesn't need to be there or have it be a lightning rod issue. But that's the problem with watering it down, in my opinion.
Well, and I
If
agree
I
that.
could speak.
Oh, good.
Sorry,
Okay.
I haven't spoken yet regarding this issue.
Go
If I could speak to it a little bit, I think I understand where the mayor is coming from, and I also understand where Council President Goodhouse is coming from. But I sort of feel like the statement as written is giving the goal a standard. And as the mayor said, if we remove it, we sort of don't have a standard in which we're trying to achieve. And I think it's important to hold ourselves accountable that the goal is to make sure everybody is on this same standard. Now, if the verbiage needs to be changed a little bit, I can potentially see doing that, but I would hesitate to make it too broad of a statement without a specific goal.
Agreed, and I was actually almost going to make kind of a wordsmith on the fly, but maybe to say as such that everyone enjoys the same safety and privilege, or something like that. So it does give at least a context, and so it still keeps that strong language in there, but also, as Youth Councilor Calderon said, that we don't make something decisive or a lightning rod for other people to focus on when there's no need to. But I think
so maybe we just take the last 4 words out. So it could read, improve the lived experience of all persons of color in Tigard such that everyone enjoys the same safety and privilege.
Yes.
Youth Councilor Calderon, what do you think?
I totally agree with that. I was going to say that we should either do something like that or just to say be equal to all other members of the community. Just that is a little bit more broad, which is something you did want to avoid, but I would support removing just the last 4 words, as you mentioned.
Councilor Lube, what do you think of that wordsmith?
I like it, and while I think you may think it's more broad, it's actually I think it's still much more specific than just saying improve the lived experience of all persons of the color in Tigard, because that sort of feels like a statement where the wordsmithing feels like a goal and a standard.
Councilor Newton, Councilor Anderson, can you all agree?
I agree.
Okay. All right, well, that was easy.
Mayor Snyder, I've been looking at version 2, and then it occurred to me, are you looking at a version 3?
I'm not really yet. I was still editing off. I made edits to a version 3, but they were edited at like 5 o'clock today because that's when I had time to do it. So I'm still looking at a version 2 that's printed, but I tried to indicate what I've updated. I added a lot more background information. But again, that's not even in the version I'm editing with you guys on the fly.
And I think it's important for us to go out to the community with a version that we're comfortable with, that we feel is a solid proposal, but we're open to, their comments. So I don't feel like we need to get it to, kind of what we think's a final, but we've got the concepts down, we're comfortable with what's being communicated, and give the community an opportunity to, have some feedback and input. So I'm ready to.
Okay, so Liz, I guess to operationalize that, my question is, do we need to wait for the police chief and/or the city attorney to put their one-liner things into each one of these? Yes or no? Yes.
I think that would be helpful. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right, we got a lot of work to do quickly. So all staff that are on this call that are going to be following up on that, Councilor Lube, you owe me information. Marty, you owe me information. I need those things as soon as possible. Staff, my goal will be to get you this version that you can then add your 2 points in each topic area, maybe by tomorrow late in the day, and then my hope would be that by Friday, at the end of the day Friday, we have this on the website. Can we, Chief McAlpine and City Attorney Rahala, can you try to meet that? And we're not talking about a long, exhaustive thing. It should be like, you know, you're going to have 2 bullets on each one that is like no more than hopefully a line or 2 long.
Yes, I can do so.
Okay. All right. Wow, what a conversation. I'm proud of our team, and this is hard stuff, and I appreciate you all going along on this journey with me and our whole community. City Manager Wine, did you need anything more on our racial justice discussion?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
For tonight? Okay. We have no non-agenda items. City Manager Wine, administrative report?
Mr. Mayor and Council, the only administrative report item I want to inform the Council about is that through the coronavirus relief funding that is flowing through Washington County, Tigard is a convener of the Commission District 3 distribution of that funding, and I've convened the city managers of City of Durham, King City, Sherwood, Tualatin, and also the Tigard Tualatin Aquatic District board chair to, we've been tasked with noting to the county how we wish that $250,000 of that Washington County funding would be distributed within District 3, within the Commission District. And the purpose of the funding is for building mental health and rebuilding the community psyche. So this is something that the Washington County Commission designated a little bit of the funding that is flowing through the county from the federal funding for coronavirus relief funds for that purpose. We had an initial discussion. I'm naming this to you, City Council, because we're trying to generate ideas about the way that funding might be spent within Commission District 3. So I just want to put out there that if you have thoughts about that and you want to give ideas, I hope you'll call me. The commitment, the initial conversation that we had with the parties that I just named was that it's that if it's possible to distribute that within all of our communities instead of just distributing it out to those entities, and the idea is that it would be something that would lift people's spirits and that it would be inclusive, that everyone in the community would be somehow be able to be to benefit from the way that funding would be distributed. That's as far as we've gotten so far. But I want you to know that that process is underway, and we're looking for ideas that could be distributed district-wide. So that's all I have for administrative report tonight.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments on that at this time? Okay, we have no executive session scheduled. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Councilor Lube, I move to adjourn.
Councilor Newton, I second that.
It's moved and seconded. City Recorder, please conduct a roll call vote.
Councilor Newton?
Aye.
Councilor Lube?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson?
Yes.
Mayor Snyder?
Yes.
Council President Goodhouse?
Yes.
All right. We are adjourned. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.